The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
Tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, and Bruce Prichard and I are taking the show on the road. We're coming to see you, Sunrise, Florida, right after the Florida Panthers smash the Edmonton Oilers. You can see Bruce Prichard and I and our biggest guest ever for Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard live. But as if that wasn't enough, they've got wrestling matches before hockey, and maybe best of all, unlimited beer, wine, soda, and food. That's right. It's the best place to be this St. Patrick's Day. It's boxofgimmicks.com. Isn't that right, Bruce?
It's the only place that I am going to be, and I'm so excited because I'm just excited to see our guest and be able to hang with him. And it'll be the best one ever. It's going to be the one that people all over the country are going to say, man, I should have gone. And the people that are there this weekend in Florida, all over South Florida, they're coming from everywhere. It's like Dusty Road. They're about coming down to South Florida, Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale. Sunrise, live and in living color. Y'all all going to be talking about it the next day. That night, St. Patrick's night, is going to be the thing. It's going to be crazy.
Boxofgimmicks.com. Use the promo code WRESTLE for the special offer. You want the wrestling matches, you want the hockey, you want the live show with our best guest ever. This is not an empty promise, but maybe best of all, unlimited beer on St. Patrick's Day. It's not a rib, but it is in the boxofgimmicks.com. That's boxofgimmicks.com, promo code WRESTLE.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know.
That's not a rib.
She pooted.
She pooted.
No, yeah, but
There's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love
you take the chicken, double cheeseburger, you take the break, double cheese, well, you know, and then double man, you know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion, motherfucker.
You're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Throw it in your Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. God damn it. What the hell show you got there? I need more. Ooh, yeah.
What say you?
Pronouns, pal. And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard.
The second most recognizable athlete in the entire world today.
Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey, Vince, to the my shorts look good tonight. Yeah. You're so big. Yeah. That's good.
Bullshit.
Welcome to WrestleMania.
Roll tide on that.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle
Something to wrestle with.
Something to wrestle with. Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
Woo, you starting early today, Daddy. That's like way too early for me, if you know what I'm saying. Hang on, let me catch up.
Well, let's get going, man. I'm excited to talk about this week, which is maybe the most underrated WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 19. But before we do, we should go back and put a bow on last week. Last week, we actually brought you 2 times the entertainment with 2 shows. On Friday, we talked about Shawn Michael's 94-95. I think it's one of our most fascinating shows so far, Bruce. What was the feedback you got about Shawn 94-95?
Even the haters were fascinated. Even the haters were saying, you know what? I don't want to hear about Shawn Michaels, but I loved the show. So I was happy to hear that even the haters didn't hate. For like 1 week, if only for 1 week, it's a good thing.
Well, we had fun the very next day talking about Saturday night's main event from March of 1988. It is a watch-along episode, which we haven't done a terrible lot of here on the show. But it was a show of note for sure, simply because it's really Harley Race's last big-time match, and it's against Hulk Hogan. Lots of fun stuff that went down in that episode, and it's a short one. It's only about an hour long, and you can catch it anytime you'd like over at youtube.com/something to wrestle. Now, of course, it's available everywhere else you enjoy podcasts as well, But we threw out the challenge to you guys that if you would help us get to 20,000 subscribers by WrestleMania for our YouTube channel, we were going to throw you the best bonus show poll ever. We're talking SummerSlam 91. We're talking Survivor Series 91. We're talking Royal Rumble 1992 and WrestleMania 8. You pick, man. What do you want to hear? It would be a great watch along episode, maybe our best possible bonus show ever. And all we need you to do is go over to youtube.com/something to wrestle and click the subscribe button. And how much does clicking that button cost, Bruce?
That'd be absolutely free of charge. Gratis. That means you pay nothing.
There you go. youtube.com/something to wrestle. We're starting to archive some clips there too. So if there's a favorite clip that you have, talk about it in some of the comments on the shows. Our main man over there at YouTube is going to get that fired up for you. It's youtube.com/something to wrestle. It's free. Go hit the subscribe button and do it before WrestleMania, and you're going to get one hell of a bonus show. But before we get to this week's show, we've really got our work cut out for us, Bruce, because connecting sleep to sports isn't always easy, but here goes. America's Mattress Firm is America's neighborhood mattress store, and it should be your goal to check out the deals they have going on every day. Their mattresses are softer than your rival team's defense. They get a 10 out of tennis. You'll love your new bed.
Well, okay, listen, all terrible dad jokes aside, head to mattressfirm.com/podcast and stretch your budget further than a gymnast before a floor routine. Get it?
I get it. And I get that we are ready to talk about WrestleMania 19. I got to tell you, Bruce, going into this, I was really not excited to cover this one because I really wanted to cover WrestleMania 14. I thought what a cool moment it would be on the show and just sort of accidental on purpose timing if we covered WrestleMania 14 when Stone Cold won his very first world title in the WWF on 3/16, because today's March 16th. Man, that would be incredible. But it didn't win. It came in third place. But what did win is Stone Cold's very last WrestleMania, which I guess is just as awesome. So we're going to cover WrestleMania 19 today, but going into it, I was like, And I think I was just sort of in the mode back when the pay-per-view happened, because I remember when this happened, I was sort of not really as fired up about this WrestleMania as I had been in years past. But I watched this show this week for the first time since it happened 15 years ago. And this might be one of the best WrestleManias ever. Maybe it's because I didn't watch it on the heels of several weeks worth of Raw, or I didn't have a mismanaged expectation about what might or might not happen there. The show in a vacuum was out fucking standing. Was it not, Bruce?
It goes down probably as far as WrestleManias that I was involved in. It's probably my second favorite WrestleMania of all time. And I stand by that, and watching it back, though, you look at it and you try to recall what it was and what was so great about it. And it's hard sometimes. And then you look at it on paper and go, maybe it's not as good as I remember or what I wanted to think it was. And then I hit play and I'm thinking I can skip over some stuff. I can fast forward. I watched it start to finish and loved it. I thought it's my number 2 WrestleMania of all time.
Number one being
WrestleMania 17.
We're going to have to agree to disagree there. So let's talk about the show, man. It goes down on March 30th. So we're quickly approaching the 15-year anniversary, just a couple weeks from now. You might be curious, on March 30th, what are we covering? Well, here you go, boys and girls, WrestleMania 4. So buckle up for that. We're going to have 2 WrestleManias to cover this year. But on March 30th, 2003, we're at Safeco Field in Seattle, Washington. One heck of a house here, 54,097 fans. Snickers was the sponsor of the show. Bruce, I know you don't like to talk about what the guys got paid, but freestyle a guess for us. Snickers is all over this. What type of money do you think they would have been paying in 2003 for a sponsorship like that?
$370. Cash, probably. I have no idea.
I mean, is it millions, hundreds of thousands?
I'm sure it's more than $1 million. Yes.
Okay. I was just curious though, because they're getting lots of play here, and obviously it would have been on all the promos leading in, on the TV. So you don't just have the signage at the event and the signage on the actual television, but you've also got it, on the lead up to the show. 54,097. Is that about what you guys were hoping for at Safeco Field?
We were, and it was a pretty damn cool field. I remember the one thing I remember most about Safeco Field was the how would I say this, anality, the assholiness of the guy that protected the pitcher's mound. They set up barricades all around the pitcher's mound on Safeco Field, and they had a guard on duty 24 hours a day that you could not step on the pitcher's mound in Safeco Field. It was like sacred holy ground, and no one, we couldn't stand on it, take pictures or anything like that. And they had it barricaded and had a guard on it 24 hours to make sure that no one did that.
So chat me up. Why Seattle? It's the first time that Seattle had gotten to WrestleMania. Safeco Field at this point was not a brand new building. It was about 4 years old, I guess. Why did Safeco get the nod here? This is in the era where you guys were starting to let towns sort of bid on WrestleMania, right?
We were, and we were looking to do something different. We were looking for a West Coast venue as well, because you can do it a little bit earlier in the day, and just to do something different, get out of the East Coast, get out of the norm, if you will. And Safeco had bid on it. It was a relatively new building. It wasn't 5 years old yet. And Seattle was a hell of a market. The Pacific Northwest was a damn good market. You're drawing from Vancouver, you can draw from Portland, and you're drawing from, Northern California, all over. And Seattle was it could be a destination city. Got the nod.
Do you remember what other markets were being considered?
Yeah. Minneapolis was being considered. St. Louis was also being considered, as well as Indianapolis. Those are, and I say that, and that's off the top of my head. I remember those markets because they were always in the running for it. It was like St. Louis was always in the running for having a WrestleMania. They always wanted to get something in the building there, and they always wanted to, have those big events.
Do you remember why St. Louis and Minneapolis were maybe never at the top of the list? I mean, it feels like we hear those cities all the time, but they never actually went out. Is there some sort of line of thinking in the office, maybe from Vince or somebody else, that sort of disqualifies them from being seriously considered?
I don't think they're big destination cities. I think that they are, they're great buildings and they're great wrestling cities, but it's not some place that someone in London, if they're considering going to WrestleMania, hey, wow, I really want to go to St. Louis, versus, hey, I want to go to Orlando. I can go see Universal Studios, Mickey Mouse, everything else. New Orleans, I can go to Bourbon Street. It's going to be a party. St. Louis has Anheuser-Busch. Minneapolis is not really that big of a destination city. Seattle, you got Vancouver. You got the Pike, whatever, the port there thing, but there's a lot of big cities around it that feed into it.
So the WWE has a lot of momentum coming into this event. The roster is maybe the most stacked ever. On top of that, Stone Cold has returned to the company in February, and Goldberg's going to debut on Raw the night after. So a lot of fans like myself like to romanticize around the 80s era, but this is probably the most stacked roster in history right here at this WrestleMania 19. Wouldn't you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, I think it was some of the best array of talent that we had. I think that we had the best and the cream of the crop of those that we were, ever going to want from the WCW era. And we had the best of the WWE era. So it was a great time as far as talent goes, man. The roster was stacked and it was deep.
I feel like we should talk a little bit about the theme song, which has always been a big part of WrestleMania. It's Crack Addict by Limp Bizkit. And that's not normally a song that you would imagine you would want that title associated with your WWE programming, but Crack Addict gets the nod. How does this come to be? I mean, obviously Limp Bizkit had an association with the company through the entrance music for the American Badass version of The Undertaker. And lots of people have been talking about Fred Durst this week since it was announced that Kid Rock was going to be going into the Hall of Fame. Do you think Limp Bizkit maybe should have been in before Kid Rock? Lots of fans were suggesting that online this week.
Again, I don't know how the hell you make that decision, but I had to laugh. I just had to laugh every single time that I heard Jerry Lawler talk about, oh, Slim Bixler's crack addict. I'm like, what? Because the name was insane and the song was what it was, but to have to say it over and over again, yeah, it didn't sound like the kind of thing you really wanted associated with your biggest event of the year.
Chat me up. How high on this is Vince McMahon?
How high is he on crack addict?
Yeah.
He liked it. He probably, I could see him dancing to crack addict all the time. And he was probably pretty damn high on it, as a matter of fact.
It just feels hilarious to me that Vince McMahon would be holding meetings. God damn it. Why aren't we using crack addict? I need crack.
We need more crack addict.
Let's talk about some company news as we head into WrestleMania 19. In early March, the WWE finally threw the towel in on the World in Times Square in New York City. Of course, it opened in late 99 and originally started out as the WWF New York. And I think the rental agreement was like a 20-year deal, but it was signed before September 11th. And of course, that affected tourism in New York, especially Times Square, for quite a while. What do you remember about making the decision to sort of shut down the World and WWF New York as a whole?
It was a losing proposition, and just became the point of you're flushing money down the toilet here. It's not creating any more revenue, and everything in Times Square, everything in New York, just those type of attractions from Planet Hollywood to, the Harley Davidson Cafe, the All-Star Cafe, they were all having hard times. And that was our model. It was the almost identical model, and none of them were working. And we thought, we would be different because we're the WWF. By God, it's going to be different. But unfortunately, we were a victim of the same problems that they all had. Plus the fact that we're in Times Square. We were in a pretty bad deal. And as far as the 20-year lease, I think that everybody that signs something in Times Square, is in a 20-year lease type of situation, and they always just sell it to the next guy because there's always going to be somebody else that comes along that wants that space and willing to pay that premium for it. So we were a victim of the times. We were a victim of the food wasn't great. That hurt. And,
Bruce, take your pills.
Okay, thank you. So, it just was time to cut the cord.
Chat me up. How much do you think the rental agreement was for WWF New York? What was the monthly rent?
God, I have no idea. I couldn't even imagine being in Times Square, what the hell that thing would be. Had to be astronomical.
Thanks, Tony. So you guys had tried everything for this. You'd had Tough Enough finales, the Raw anniversary special. You would do cutaways to show people sort of partying inside of Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views and just everything you could. But we've heard about Vince sort of having these crazy ideas, like the time he tried to buy a casino, or I guess he did buy a casino.
Oh, we did buy a casino.
Tell me about, when you first heard about this concept of the World, how long ahead of them actually opening it in 99 had this been something Vince was sort of romanticizing, the concept of?
Well, going back to even, like you say, the casino, the casino was something that was sprung upon us after he did it. I'll never forget the phone call, man. He called me from Vegas. I just bought a casino, pal. And other than Ed Kaufman, who was our legal counsel, I don't know that anyone knew that Vince was serious about going to buy a casino. He had talked about, we'll have casinos, we'll have themed restaurants, we'll have our own network, we'll have all of these things. And, a lot of times you chalk it up to, hey, we're going to work towards this. And when it actually happens, it's like, oh shit, this is actually happening. And now you got to make it work. So he had always talked about those things, and it just became a reality. It's like the time that he wanted to do the Hall of Fame in Orlando. They went down and bought a building. We're going to have a physical Hall of Fame. The reality of actually being able to open it up and make it a reality in Orlando, Florida, unfortunately didn't come to pass. But he always talked about things like that. People always thought he was crazy.
Why was it changed from WWF New York to the World? Did somebody sort of think maybe people thought it was too wrestling and you wanted, some outside non-wrestling fans to come enjoy the space?
Well, there were two entities. There was the restaurant and then there was the club. And the club was potentially a hot spot, being right there in Times Square in the locale. So the idea behind it was, if you just call it the World, maybe people aren't going to associate it as a wrestling themed club. They're going to come to it for the club aspect of it and come and check it out. And for a while it worked, but we tried so many different things with it, from it being a theater and being a show place where we had Chris Angel in there and different bands and different attractions, that it really didn't have an identity. And the only identity it did have was the wrestling club. And we didn't want it to be the wrestling club. We wanted it to be more than that. So that was the decision to just call it the World.
So why did it shut down? Here we go. The WWE posted all the losses for the World on the latest quarterly statement. This is directly from the dirt sheets. Released the same day the club was shut down. WWE reported a loss of over $26 million for the third quarter of 2003. Of that, nearly $33 million was due to losses incurred from the World. So had the World not shut down, WWE would have been able to report a profit for the last quarter of around $7 million. So not only was this thing losing money, it cost a damn arm and a leg to shut down. $33 million from closing the World. Unbelievable.
Well, it would have cost a lot more money to keep it open and keep it going.
I'm glad you said that, because it was written, the World lost roughly $1 million per month, every month it existed. Process that. This is Vince McMahon's, hey, goddamn pal, we're going to get a restaurant in Times Square. $1 million a month it lost every month. During that time span, this is from the dirt sheets, wrestler salaries have dropped drastically. The $12 million in approximate annual losses, had it been spent on wrestlers instead, would have equaled an approximate range for each wrestler on a 50-man roster of roughly $240,000 each per year. Instead, the wrestlers have been asked to take pay cuts on their so-called downside guarantees. And here we are. Now, obviously the dirt sheets are sort of reaching here. And I know you're going to say, oh, that money came from a different fund. But isn't it logical that if we're trying to run a business here, in the end, the bottom line's the bottom line. And if you've got one area of your business hemorrhaging $12 million worth of cash, you try to make up some of that somewhere else so you can turn that around, right?
Okay. Well, first of all, it did come from a completely different part of the company. And second of all, name me one talent who was asked to take a reduction.
Well, name me one that got a raise.
I have no idea. I don't know. They're saying that several were asked to take reductions. Who? I don't know of anybody that was ever asked to take a reduction because of that. And I don't know that that's factual. And so to say that, I believe that they are reaching, and I think they're just trying to create stories that aren't necessarily there.
I mean, I don't know how we can argue this, and I'm glad we're going to argue right at the top of the show, but if the company is reporting a loss, you're saying nobody was asked to take a pay cut. Come the fuck on. If you're reporting a loss, yeah, somebody's taking a pay cut.
Okay. I didn't take a pay cut. And again, I don't know of any, I don't know of one single talent that was asked to take a reduction in their downside guarantee. I never heard that until you just said it.
Okay. Allegedly you guys had a theme ride in Niagra Falls that operated for 1 day in 2002 before being shut down for safety violations, and has sat dormant ever since. I never even heard about this. What do you remember about a theme ride in Niagara Falls that ran for 1 fucking day?
Well, it was some theme ride they already had, and they renamed it a WWE, WWF at the time, theme deal. That's all it was. It was just something that they wanted to do. It's like in Astroworld in Houston back in the day, the Black Dragon was named a million different things. It was the same ride. They just named it different things throughout the years. Batman was Batman. Batman was Superman. All these different things. They just rename them. So the theme ride gimmick was something actually that we were going to do. We did do for a while with Universal. There was a little theme attraction at Universal in Hollywood, California, that they did. We wanted to do that also in Orlando, fell through, but it was just a theme park in Niagara Falls that named one of their rides after us.
And you guys had purchased the ride, or you just licensed?
No, it was a licensing deal. Hey, we'd like to license the WWE name for a ride for maybe a season or something like that.
Do you remember what it was called?
Maybe it was for a weekend. Sometimes they do.
Do you remember what it was called?
I don't. I remember seeing the drawings of it. I remember seeing the depictions of the opening to it and all that stuff, like the entryway into it, but I don't remember what the hell it even was.
There's talk that, Vince might like the idea of opening a WWE theme park. I mean, this was years ago when we first heard about this, and maybe some people started to think, maybe he does have some sort of weird obsession, because last year's WrestleMania was roller coaster themed and called the Ultimate Thrill Ride. Did Vince ever talk about opening a theme park?
Yeah, we talked about it. That's another one that you can chalk that up there with the theme park and the themed restaurants and the casinos and the networks and everything else. Yes. WWF, the, world, and being able to go in and have rides kind of mirrored after every single wrestler. The haunted house would be the Undertaker's haunted house, the Stone Cold Coaster, the rocks, whatever, the rock drop, just all these different things that we've talked about. Those cartoons back when they did Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling cartoon, they had that theme park in there, and that's something, a vision that he's always had as well.
Supposedly he was a big fan of the Niagara Falls location because they did open a store there. And they tried to do autograph sessions. And of course they sold merchandise, and the TVs just sort of rolled all the old pay-per-views, and eventually it closed in 2011. But I think for a minute, the ride that was only open for a brief time. And it's funny, cause I almost made a joke before I found this just now. It's called the Pile Driver. So I guess the Pile Driver really is banned. Did you ever ride the ride or see the ride? Nope. I know you say you saw a sketch, but did you ever visit this Niagara Falls facility?
Nope. Never did. And the store that we had there, the WWF store that we had, was not a part of an amusement park. It was a store in like one of the outdoor malls or something like that. And it was, part of the attraction in the attraction area there at Niagara Falls. And I guess it did okay in the very beginning, but after a while, it was one of the first, those wrestling collectible stores, so to speak.
Let's take a look at some money for a minute. And I know that a lot of people are not entertained by this, but I am fascinated by it because this is a weird time in the business. We're going to run through the roster in a little bit, and you're going to see just an incredible amount of talent on this card. But for whatever reason, the buy rate was down, and we're going to sort of beat up why that might be. Is it because the WWF doesn't have any competition and Vince McMahon needs competition? Or is it because the fans themselves really thrived on having freedom of choice? And if they didn't like one thing, they could switch over to something else. And that maybe added a level of excitement. Either way, total revenues compared to the same quarter in 2002 were down to $95.6 million from $100.2 million. Your live events were up, but when you combined it with some of the television, it was down. Pay-per-view revenues were down about 2 million as well. And some of the pay-per-view domestic buys were a big part of that, because you've got 1.3 million compared to 1.6 million the prior year. And your television rights fees actually increased 25%. So when we're talking about revenues going down, TV's actually going up. And TV ad revenue is down. So it's weird because there's multiple levels of TV, and everybody's still fascinated with ratings because so many of us grew up in that Monday Night Wars era. but revenue from television commercials is way down, like 4 million, but it is up 25% on rights fees. When do you remember that swing sort of happening? Because even today, there is this appetite for content in the world, whether it's YouTube or Amazon or over the top or whatever. People are consumed with owning the content. And that's why, you know, things like YouTube and Twitch and all those services really have thrived, because it's all about the content. But the overall ad revenue here is dipping. When do you remember the rights fees sort of surpassing the ad fees, if that makes sense?
Well, the rights fees probably surpassed the ad fees when we stopped selling ads. And when we demanded more rights fees and let the networks go ahead and keep all of that ad revenue. So that's a perceived decline because they're selling less of it in a lot of respects, and the rights fees go up. You know, it's interesting because when they talk about the audience size, Eric Bischoff and I have discussed this for years, where when you look at the Monday Night Wars and people go, oh my God, you know, between the two shows, there were this many people watching wrestling. I don't believe it. I think that probably if you were to take the highest number of either one of those shows, that's probably the true number of how many people and what that audience truly was. I think a lot of the ratings were duplication from people sampling both shows and going back and forth. And it during this time was pretty much a leveling off period where the ratings were settling down and things were just kind of, you know, you come off of a high and now you're coming down a little bit. And that's where we were at this time.
I also feel like it's worth mentioning that merchandise is down, but licensing revenues were up. You know, it's an interesting business because I think so many of us still get sort of caught up in ratings and buy rates. We forget there's all these other ways to make money: television ads, television rights, you know, merchandise sales, but then also licensing. So it's a fun time in the business, but it is something that's sort of hard to put your finger on. Like, hey, what's really going on? Do you remember there being sort of a, fuck, I don't know what to do feeling in some of the meetings with Vince when you see that, hey, revenue's down, but look at our fucking roster. It's as stacked as it's ever been.
You know, there were times where you would sit in these meetings with a lot of the executives that were over their own departments, and it was an opportunity for them, each and every one of them, to kind of, you know, puff their chests out and say, yes, but our department is doing this and our department is doing that. And we made this deal and we made that deal. You know, as my good friend Michael Hayes, you know, once stated in a meeting, you know, what do you do? I make money for this company. What the fuck do you do? So I think at the end of the day, when you look at the whole pie, it was healthy and it was still, you know, it was still doing okay. There was no need to panic. And where one revenue might be down over here, this one over here was increasing and doing big numbers. So that's why I say it's kind of a leveling off, seeing where we are. And while we were no longer selling ad revenue, you know, those rights, now all of a sudden the TV rights revenue is increasing because we're not getting the ad revenue anymore. So it's just a different time, and times were changing, and the way that you got paid was changing.
Well, and the roster was changing. You know, we're talking about how stacked it is, but it's not without injury. Just a few matches into his return after being out for many months due to a shoulder injury, Randy Orton suffers an even more serious injury to his foot. And in the same match, Batista tears his tricep. What do you remember about Randy's return? And then immediately he's out again. And then the same match, another member of Evolution, and they're getting a big push here, he's out too.
Well, it was disappointing. And I think there was a feeling at that time, is Randy going to be injury prone? Now, and the injury is one thing, and getting hurt. This was an accident. This is something where the Dudleys ended up crushing his foot, and that was an accident. That was no fault of Randy. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't Randy put himself in a bad position or Randy had weak feet or anything like that. It was just a straight up accident, but it hurts. it hurts when you got, your young stud coming up, two of them, and him and Batista getting hurt at the same time because you're trying to look at the future and you're looking down the line as to what you've got coming up. And boy, there was a time there, man, it felt like everybody was dropping.
Was there any heat on the Dudleys for that injury? We know at times Randy Orton, according to the rumor and innuendo, has been difficult to deal with, but when Bubba lands on his foot and, he's out, is there any sort of real heat with Randy and the Dudleys over that?
I don't know. I don't know if there was heat with Randy and the Dudleys. I think that, unfortunately, as we say, it ain't ballet, and things happen in the ring sometimes. It's an unfortunate accident, and you can't, it just happens. It absolutely just happens. I had, little teeny tiny Bruno Lauer fall on my ankle and shatter my ankle. Imagine that. It was a freak accident. He didn't mean to do it. Hang on, wait. Bruno might have meant to do it, come to think of it. But no, those things happen, and you just have to suck it up and, move your chess piece.
Let's talk about Batista for a minute. I can't wait till we do a Batista episode here on the show. But when he tears his tricep, is there a feeling amongst the office of the locker room that maybe one of the reasons he's had these injuries is he's too big?
I don't know. I think that there's always that feeling whenever you look at the big guys and guys that are built that way, the bodybuilding guys, they train differently.
Right.
And you look at it and go, okay, well, maybe if they trained kind of like a CrossFit or whatever the hell, there's always going to be that argument. And, shit just happens.
Let's talk about Steve Austin. Of course, this is really going to be a lot about Steve Austin in this episode, since this is really his sort of swan song in the WWE, at least as an in-ring performer. It comes out right before WrestleMania that his contract was going to expire in September. And Hulk Hogan here was working without a contract. He'd actually worked the No Way Out pay-per-view without a contract, but the belief was that he was going to re-sign. And one of the concessions that WWE probably had to make was to bring in Jimmy Hart. Do you remember there being conversations with Hulk about would he come back? Wouldn't he come back? And one of those requests on his side to be involving Jimmy Hart?
Well, Hulk wanted someone to, his quote manager, to be able to kind of get him through airports and get his bags and handle his personal appearances and all of that other ancillary stuff. So the idea was to bring Jimmy Hart in as a goodwill ambassador and use Jimmy Hart to help with promotion stuff, but also be the one to accompany Hulk on all of his stuff.
Yeah. Allegedly Austin and Hogan sat next to each other on a plane ride out of Montreal and, had to transfer in Atlanta. Of course, Austin goes to Texas from there and Hogan goes to Tampa. I only mention this because the rumor and innuendo is that these guys weren't always the best of friends. And in the documentary that accompanied this pay-per-view, or covered this pay-per-view rather, on the WrestleMania 20 DVD, The Mania of WrestleMania, Hunter's doing a voiceover where he's talking about how WrestleMania is where you get together with all your brothers and your family members, but there's some members of your family maybe you don't really like, but you tolerate them at dinner. And when he says that line about people you don't really like, they get a really tight, long shot on Hulk Hogan. How was Hogan with some of the top guys at the time? How was his relationship with Austin at this point?
I don't know that they really even had a relationship. It was professional, and I don't know, they hung out and drank together or did anything like that but they were cordial and they were professional. That was about it, but it's a funny thing with, I'll take it, Hulk is an example. Before that, Bruno, people like that. The family dynamic of, let's say, Bruno. Vince McMahon felt that Bruno had not done his father right. So there was a little bit of animosity between Bruno and Vince because of that. And I think that if you ever screwed the old man, then Vince didn't want to do business with you. There was that feeling with Ivan Koloff. There was that feeling with a lot of guys that Vince preferred not to do business with because he felt that they had wronged his dad. And I think that the kids, Shane and Stephanie, on the other side of that, kind of felt the same way, that if they had perceived that someone had not done business well with their dad, there was that little bit of animosity. And over the years, they've learned, the lesson that Vince has kind of taught everybody is you do business with everybody if there's business to be done. But especially when they were younger, it was kind of like, no, I don't like him because he screwed my dad over, the perception that he screwed my dad over. Hulk leaving at the time and going to work for WCW, the whole angle that we were doing during this time with Vince and Hulk was all based in reality. Hey, Hulk, you left, man. You went and testified for the U.S. government against me when I'm fighting for my life. That was all real. And it was heartfelt. But at the same time, Vince could forgive. I don't know that those around him always did. If that makes sense to you.
Isn't it interesting that Austin had sort of made fun of Hulk Hogan for being old when he was in ECW and really felt like Hogan had maybe held him down in WCW. But when they get over here, Austin's going to be the one who retires from in-ring competition before Hogan.
Okay.
Well, I'm just curious. Do you think that's because Hogan had a little help? Like, for over 30 years, men have trusted Just for Men to provide easy gray care solutions. And now they can trust Just for Men to provide a hair growth solution as well. And maybe had Hogan had that, things would have looked a little different for him. Right, Bruce?
Well, I guess what you're trying to say too is Steve, before Steve went ahead and shaved his hair, because the best thing to do is before you lose all your hair, man, when you feel that it's starting to thin out, then you need to go and you need to check this out, because with the Just for Men, they've got a unique precision spray applicator, and it's hair regrowth made easy. You simply spray it in, sit back, and move on. And when you look as good as you feel on the inside, every date night, every meeting, every match, every guy's night out is something that you're going to look forward to.
Start winning over thinning. Look for 1 and 3 month supplies of hair regrowth in the shave aisle, or visit our friends Just for Men over at jfmgrowhair.com. That's jfmgrowhair.com, and use the promo code regrowth25 to get 25% off your purchase. That's jfmgrowhair.com, and use promo code regrowth25 for 25% off. Let's talk a little bit about Paul Heyman, because we covered in our Paul Heyman episode
No, sir. Oh, go ahead.
that he had been removed from the SmackDown booking team. And allegedly, the final straw for him was sending Eddie Guerrero to tell Kevin Dunn he wasn't happy with his street vignette on SmackDown. Allegedly, when pressed on the matter, Guerrero said, it was really Paul Heyman who was unhappy, and he sent me to complain. Is that the way you remember that going down?
I really don't remember that at all. The whole ordeal with Paul at that time, I think, was a culmination of a lot of things. And I think it was frustration on Vince and Stephanie's part, dealing with Paul. And I think that there was frustration on Paul's end dealing with Vince, because while there were a lot of us, not a lot of, but there were those of us that disagreed with Vince. And as I've talked about over the years here on the podcast, I learned how to do it in a little nicer way. And Paul, I don't know, had learned that yet. And Paul liked to butt heads, and Paul liked to let the entire world know that he was the smartest guy in the room. So there's a way to deal with Vince. There's a time to disagree with him, and there's a time to move on once he makes a decision. And after you've stated your case and he makes his decision, move on. And I don't know that Paul at this point in his career had perfected that. I don't know. Paul's extremely successful and a great gift of gab. Maybe he's changed his dynamic in that regard. But at that time, I think it was the culmination of just everything that Vince was frustrated. Paul was frustrated, and everybody felt the best thing to do was, okay, let's remove Paul from this role for a while.
In late February, Stephanie McMahon walked out onto the stage on SmackDown, I believe, and sort of teased that she was going to be posing for Playboy, but instead announced that Torrie Wilson was going to be on the magazine's cover. Playboy came calling for everybody. Did Playboy ever inquire about Stephanie McMahon that you know of?
Not that I know of, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did.
Hypothetically, if they would have, what would Vince's reaction be to that?
For real?
Well, we're trying to do a fucking show, Bruce. If you want to be entertaining, we can do that, or you can just be Tony Schiavone. It's cool with me either way.
Well, the booking committee didn't think that, I think Vince would say, "Get them puppies out. Let's see them bark." The real Vince McMahon would probably consider it. And if it was good for business, well, baby girl, let's see them. So who knows?
Let's see what. They're not chocolate.
See them puppies.
Oh, okay. So I got it.
Warm puppies.
Sylvan was introduced as Vince McMahon's personal referee. Whose idea was this? This feels like a Pat Patterson idea.
No, Pat wasn't even really in the company at the time. It was Vince's idea, and it came from a deal that we did in Montreal where Sylvan got beat up by Chris Jericho and took a hell of an ass whooping and didn't complain and got up. No one really knew who Sylvan was. And man, Vince fell in love with him. We used him for the heel referee in Montreal. And the fact that we had used him at No Way Out, Vince just wanted to continue using him. It wasn't going to be a long-term deal. It was to get us through this.
In the last Raw of February, Booker T actually wins a battle royal to determine who is going to get a title shot against Triple H at WrestleMania. It comes down to The Rock and Booker T, and I think most people assumed The Rock was going to actually win that. But surprise, surprise, Booker T gets the nod. You guys are sort of left to figure out what you're going to do here. Of course, Brock won the Royal Rumble, so Brock is going to go after Kurt Angle. We know that. Was there a hard and fast rule or a real plan for the other title, for the Raw belt at this point? I mean, if you know that, hey, Brock's going to win the Royal Rumble, we're going to put, him and Kurt in the main event for the SmackDown title. Okay, we got to do something for Raw. Fuck it. Let's just do a battle royal on Raw. That feels sort of thrown together. Was it?
Kind of. And, when you look at the totality of the WrestleMania card itself, when you've got the return, you're going to have the return of Rock and Austin, the third match. That's an attraction in and of itself. Doesn't need a title involved in it. It's about pride at this point. When you're going to have Vince and Hulk, and within the company for us, and I was more on the SmackDown side during this period, it was all about crowning the new champion in Brock Lesnar. So unfortunately, by default, the Raw World Champion was, I don't want to say, a secondary concern. To me, it was, because I was SmackDown, but the cachet was frankly on the other matches. And so you want to do something to try and bring somebody up, and that being Booker T, and still feature that match as best you can. But there wasn't, unfortunately, that's just the way that the cards kind of fell.
Was there consideration ever, like before the matches went sideways, for Scott Steiner to be the guy in here at WrestleMania against Triple H?
No, because Vince didn't want to have that rematch. So no, to answer the question, no, at that point there wasn't, because he had it at Royal Rumble. He didn't want to go that many times at WrestleMania. He wanted something fresh for WrestleMania.
So he didn't want a rematch for Scott Steiner. Scott Steiner's not even on the card. What did he want for Scott Steiner here, if not another match with Hunter?
At this point, he was not real happy with the Scott Steiner experiment and was looking to try and do something else with him and move him into a tag team.
I'm not asking at this point. I mean, originally, like, it does feel like we're sort of rushing a Triple H world title match with Booker T. It feels like Scott Steiner's left with really nothing to do. And you said that wasn't the plan ever. So the plan was just, let's beat Scott Steiner and then let his ass sit at home. And then let's make our other world title opponent just be decided by a battle royal.
At that point, yes, that is what it was. And it wasn't about just let the guy sit at home. You can't have everybody on the roster cannot be on as much as we try. And sometimes there's just nothing creatively for them. And if you do something else, it's forcing them in there. And wanting to do something new, you're forced with that task of, okay, you've got to do something new. You don't have a lot of time. Make a battle royal, make a contender for the championship.
Whew. Sometimes you just want to be argumentative, man. Let's just move on.
No, I see that's what it's like. You guys can sit back 2020. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? There's a lot of extenuating circumstances.
I'm not
have John Cena be a big part of this. We had deals in place for John Cena with the rappers to be a big part of WrestleMania. They dropped out. They agreed up front. You get into the promotion, you're going, knowing this is what you got. They drop out. You've moved on with other guys. Now there's no place for John Cena. Why wasn't John Cena on there?
No,
because unfortunately his shit didn't dropped out. Why wasn't Scott Steiner on there? Because there was not a place for him at that time.
I'm not arguing why he wasn't on it. I'm asking what the original plan was. And you said,
and I don't remember. I don't remember there even was an original plan for him.
So Booker T comes to the ring on the first Raw of March, and he's hyping up his WrestleMania title match. And then Triple H comes out, and this is where things get interesting. This is directly from the torch. Booker is going to WrestleMania, but someone, quote, like you, end quote, doesn't get to be world champion. Triple H said, people like you don't get to be world champion. That's reserved for people like me. Triple H said Booker isn't here to be a competitor. He's here to be an entertainer. So Triple H asked for a little dance and for one of those spinneroonies and said, come on, Book, dance, entertain me. That's your job. You're here to make people laugh, and you're very good at it with your nappy hair and your suckers. Hell, I was laughing all week after you won that 20-man over-the-top battle royal. I'll laugh my ass off thinking about you challenging me for the World Heavyweight Championship. You see, Book, I understand that you've been the 5-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion. I get all that. But let's face it, that place was a joke, Book. And then he goes on to Rick and says, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but wasn't that the same time the other illustrious superstars such as David Arquette and some guy named Vince Russo was champ, right? Let's face it, Buck, you championshiped that place right into the ground. I'll give you this. You have your moments. Last week when you threw the Rock over the top rope, hell, that was a moment. But think about it for a sec. What does that give you? What do you get? You're going to get to go to WrestleMania. This is not some nickel and dime fly by night gig, Buck. This is the real deal. It's WrestleMania, the biggest show on earth, the Big Daddy. You're going to go and you're going to be in the main event and you're going to wrestle the greatest professional wrestler alive on the planet today. You're going to wrestle the game and you're going to step in with the end all be all of this business. And when you get there, you're going to do what people like you always do. You're going to lose. Of course, Booker takes issue with this and, he says somebody like me is going to ragtag your ass and beat you for the world championship. Of course, JR on commentary, putting over the baby face. Damn right, Booker. You got to believe, brother. And then Hunter says something like, good luck, Booker. You're going to need it. Oh, and another thing, good luck in your match with Scott Steiner. Good luck, because with a guy like Scott Steiner, you might even be lucky to make it to WrestleMania. So people are going to form their own opinion about this promo, and Lord knows they already have. It's our most requested thing to talk about this week. Who wrote the dialogue?
I believe Brian Gewirtz wrote the promo. However, I think that, when you take it out of context and you go look at the entire promotion of what that match was about and what the whole angle was about, it was about someone from WCW that had held that championship 5 times before, thinking that they were worthy to headline a WWF WrestleMania. And that was the content, again, when you isolate one promo and a few lines out of one promo and the way it was delivered and the way you just delivered it, okay, it can be taken in a lot of ways. The way it was intended and the way it was written and the way that the whole angle was laid out was about Booker T being the standard bearer of WCW, because at that time, Booker was the biggest star to come out of WCW, 5-time world champion. And can you really think that you can hang in the main event of a WrestleMania? That was a storyline, and people like to pick out, this one promo and lines out of it and say, okay, delivered how they were. And granted, how they were delivered, you can take it a lot of ways, but the intent and the way that the angle was laid out was exactly as I just laid it out to you.
Let me just say, before I shit all over it, that I can defend some of this. Someone like you doesn't get to be world champion could not only be said to Booker T, but it could be said to Hurricane Helms, a white guy. Hurricane was a tremendous character, but he was there, quote unquote, to make people laugh. And you're very good at it. The way the Hurricane character was presented, it was supposed to be fun. That was the idea. And obviously Booker T coming out and doing the spinneroonie, it's supposed to be fun. I can get behind that. And I can even get behind people like you and not necessarily jump to, boy, that's some bullshit. However, when he throws in your nappy hair, pretty fucking hard for me to get behind.
Oh, and I don't get behind the nappy hair either. And, but you go fast forward or go backwards. Rock saying that was all okay.
Well, but you know why
but
that
again,
is.
I'm saying you're saying it because a white man saying it to a black man that's bad. And I'm saying that it's not good at all. So I'm not going to defend it. I'm just telling you what the angle and what it was. And people like to pick out, certain words. You want to pick out that one thing, but when you look at the overall scope of it, that was what the angle was about. Someone from WCW who had been a 5-time champion, not being worthy of being in the WWE
with his nappy hair.
Well, that's the one thing you want to pick on, and that's what you want to hang your hat on. Then cool.
There is a section of fans. We're going to skip ahead here. Obviously we're going to cover it in great detail, but there's a section of fans who think that this offensive bullshit, because that's really what I think it is. They think that, this would have been okay. I mean, not really, but it would have been less bad. Maybe that's the right way of saying it. If he'd have won. So if you're sort of burying him and, I'm not saying Hunter's a racist in real life. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying this promo, you could misconstrue or maybe not even misconstrue.
And I'm not saying that you can't misconstrue it.
You could be led to believe, hey, they're going with a racist gimmick here. But the hope is at the end that the underdog, the babyface, the good guy, the guy who's being persecuted fucking overcomes and wins. And that doesn't happen. Do you believe that if some of this, some of the more questionable remarks here would have existed, but then Booker won the belt, that maybe it would still be a hot button for fans all these years later?
I think that it probably would have alleviated a lot of that had that happened.
Was that when Hunter is out here saying nappy hair and dance and make me laugh and people like you, at that moment, not 3 weeks after, but at that moment, was the plan for him to go out here, get the heat, and then he's going to drop the belt at WrestleMania? Or was the plan at this point already, all right, go out there and embarrass him and say some racist shit, and then we'll smash his ass at WrestleMania?
Well, no, first of all, the plan was always for Hunter to go over at WrestleMania. And that was always the plan from the initial get-go. But again, I love it when you sit there and you want to book everything and well, if everything's a happy end, then what? Then what do you do? And when you look at the whole picture and you try to book a card like WrestleMania, you've got to have your ebbs and flows. You got to have your peaks and valleys. And Vince was adamant from the very start. There was one major title that was going to change hands in his eyes that night, and that was Brock. We were crowning one guy, one new babyface, and that was it. And it was going to be Brock's night. And everybody knew that from the start. That was never, from time to time, it'd be brought up. What if? No. That's all we're going to do. We're crowning Brock that night. There was really no more debate beyond that. So it's easy to sit back and go, well, they should have done it. But no, when you talk about the overall story and you talk about the whole package and everything else that you have to do and everybody else on the card and all the other matches and all the other stories, no, that would not have been the best thing to do.
Well, I'm just saying it feels like it would have been a natural thing when you're saying, oh, you could give them a happy ending. That does feel like the formula for wrestling, but not with Triple H, because 6 months prior to this, he was fucking guys' dead girlfriends and corpses, and that sets up a pay-per-view match. And oh, by the way, he wins there too. So get your chapstick out, motherfucker. You can't defend this. The babyface should have won.
No, he shouldn't have won in the whole damn. No, he shouldn't have. He shouldn't have. Again, go out and buy a wrestling promotion and go out and promote it for 10 years. And with that logic, it won't last too.
I'll tell you this, if an indie promoter,
you have to have heels and baby faces. You have to have something for the baby face to overcome. And if you go in every big show, well, the baby face overcomes it, then you got to have them have something for them to fight for.
Don't be ridiculous. I'm not suggesting that the baby face has to always prevail.
You just said that's the formula and that's what we should do. Always have a happy ending.
No, I'm not saying that, but it is baby face territory. You've told us on that for this fucking show for 2 years. True or false?
That is true.
Okay. So, but not if the baby face has nappy hair, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm telling you that the end of the night for WrestleMania, that night, we wanted one guy to be the star, one guy for the big championship, that one big title change. That was to be Brock Lesnar. I'm
fine with that. I think my question is, in hindsight, can you just
so you're saying we made our decision on Booker's hair?
No, I'm saying if you knew he wasn't going to win, maybe you shouldn't have included that shit because it's not a good look.
Well, I didn't include it. And again, that goes back to delivery sometimes. And it goes back to, if you look at the totality, not one promo, you look at the totality of the entire promotion. And I think you will find that we didn't focus on his nappy hair. That's one line out of one promo. When you look at the totality of everything that we did in that promotion, you will see it was about WCW and WWF.
Can you just say, hey, we fucked up. We shouldn't have had him say that.
Oh, do I think he should have said that? I said that already. No, I thought it was bad. I don't think he should have said that. I don't think that was written for him. But I don't know that he didn't go to Booker and they said, hey, yeah, go ahead and do that. I don't know that. But I'm saying that I don't think it was good, but I also know it wasn't written that way, and that wasn't the intent, and that also isn't the way that the overall promotion was delivered.
Do you think WWE would ever veer into this territory again in 2018?
God, I would hope not.
Did you ever
when you look back, there's a lot of things that were done that never should have been done.
Sure.
Tons. Again, when you revisionist history, yes, there's a shitload of that.
Do you remember there being any sort of comment from the locker room from guys like Ron Simmons or whoever who maybe had an opinion on this promo?
I don't know anybody that had an opinion on that specific promo that said anything, but I will tell you that there were times over the years that guys like a Ron Simmons or like Booker that would have said, hey, go ahead and go there. Again, trying to create natural, animosity and get people going, ooh, did they say that? Did they really just do that? And that was a different time in the business. And it doesn't make it right at all in any way, shape, or form.
Did you ever have a conversation? You're really, I guess we should say right now, full disclosure, Booker T is one of your best friends in real life. True or false?
Absolutely.
And he was our guest, out in our Las Vegas live show a couple of months ago. And we've got another one of your great friends who's going to join us tomorrow in Florida. But I know at different times you guys have to have conversations about the business. Did you ever talk to him about this brief feud or promo or match at WrestleMania or any of that with Hunter? Did that ever come up in y'all's quiet time?
Yeah, it has. I mean, we've talked a lot about, this exact, type of situation from, Vince saying the N-word on TV and me having to go to Booker and talk to him about it. And Booker being cool with it. Yeah, go ahead, man. And being cool with it. I think Booker's a realist and looks at it, and he's a very proud man that is willing to go out there and fight for everything that he stands for. And he stands for being a man, just first and foremost. And I never looked at, it's like I said to Booker one time, "You're black? Really?" He's a man. And that's all he is. And I go back to the antiquated way that the wrestling business used to be, where JYD leaves the Mid-South territory. And the answer to that is, I've got to get a black baby face. Wait a minute. Don't you just have to get a baby face? Mm-hmm. Why does it matter what color they are?
Right.
Well, because JYD was black and he was a big draw in Louisiana. No, JYD was just a draw. He drew whites, he drew blacks, he drew browns, he drew everything. He drew.
But in fairness, we hear that narrative as wrestling fans all the time that, hey, they really want to put Alberto Del Rio in a prominent spot because they're trying to get the Hispanic community. And maybe 10 years before that, it was Rey Mysterio. With the idea that if you have a Mexican star, you can attract a Mexican audience. There is truth to that, right?
It helps. It helps with the Hispanic audience if you speak their language. Yes. However, the stars that happened to be Hispanic, Eddie Guerrero, drew everybody. Rey Mysterio draws everybody. Alberto draws everybody. That's the magic. They happen to be Hispanic. Use that. Use their bilingual, use their attraction, use their Hispanic heritage to bring the Hispanics that we may not have watching our product, that may only want to watch because they want somebody like themselves to root for. So, yes, that's been, that's marketing 101.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Kurt Angle. Now, we talked a lot about Kurt Angle in this moment in time in our Kurt Angle episode, which is available in the archives now over at youtube.com/something to wrestle. But I do feel like we should mention here that his certainty for WrestleMania was certainly in question. He did an MRI and it showed that his neck was in terrible shape. He had tube discs that were in bad spots. He had, against the spinal cord, he had multiple bone spurs. He had lots of calcium, built up, and he's in major, major pain. And he's probably been in that pain for like 6 or 7 years, right, Bruce?
Been with that pain ever since the Olympics.
So the news is he's going to have neck fusion surgery, which is going to have him out for a year. And this comes right before WrestleMania. And the creative team is now tasked with, what the hell do we do? And the original plan was Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle. And all of a sudden they have to come up with a new match. What else was considered, Bruce? The dirt sheets at the time seemed to think that the informal locker room vote, whatever that may be, was that people thought Chris Benoit was probably a worthy opponent for Brock. But maybe Vince McMahon wasn't really seeing Benoit, at least at this time, as a world title level talent. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah. I don't think that Vince felt that Chris had the personality to be able to pull it off. And it was just such a shock, first of all, when you're planning for something, then it's like, hey, guys, everything that we've worked for up until this point may not happen. And there was even a point where it just wasn't going to happen. We need plan B. We talked about Benoit. We talked about Eddie. We talked about taking the Raw Championship and the SmackDown Championship and going back to a unified title. You name it. We talked about pretty much every what if that you could imagine on the roster. Does Undertaker come in and does Big Show? Yeah. If there was a what if scenario, we examined it. And in the meantime, while all this is going on, Kurt is going to different doctors and getting different opinions and going in and I think looking for somebody to tell him, hey, you can do this. Because in Kurt's head, he was never not going to do it. And I really believe that. And I think if he could have not, if we could have not gotten that news, I think that would have been Kurt's perfect world. But at the same time, it was devastating news, and you had to know. And it's for his well-being and his family and everybody else. It's like, okay, shit, what do you do? And then they get in and say, well, he's been doing this for all this time without any issue. And you go back and say, yeah, he has. He's been doing it for all these years, frankly, a long time with the exact same injury. So do we do one more match and get done with it? And that was Kurt's argument, and that was Kurt's pitch. I can do this match. He didn't want to drop out.
And one of the reasons, and lots of wrestling fans, and this is accurate, think that the guys take a lot of pride in, man, I want to go. I want to be in that featured spot. This match is important to me. But if he's in the main event of WrestleMania for the world title, he also stands to make a lot of fucking money, does he not?
Sure he does.
I mean, and it's probably to a point, his pain at this moment, he's probably not even sleeping right at night, right?
I doubt he's sleeping. Well, I know he's not sleeping. He's hurting. And he had been hurting for many years and had been masking it and been, doing a lot of things to compensate for that pain that weren't all that healthy for him.
Well, something that is healthy is a good night's sleep. So let's get back to Mattress Firm and keep the ball rolling, shall we? Everyone knows how important stretching is before an event, and so does Mattress Firm, except it's your dollar. Your budget stretches further when you're shopping at America's neighborhood mattress store. It's the true home run, and you'll have a ball. They're the head coaches when it comes to mattress expertise, but know this, they're more than mattress experts. They have a game plan that helps you transform your mattress into a bed. From adjustable bases and sheets to headboards and bedroom decor, they literally and figuratively have you covered up like your favorite cornerback.
Go to mattressfirm.com/podcast to see what deals are happening as I read this sentence to you. They even offer you a 120-day sleep night trial to ensure perfection and a 120-night low price guarantee. So you paid the perfect price. Talk about a 1-2 punch, a knockout, if you will. Score big with the perfect bed. Head to mattressfirm.com/podcast to get the play-by-play on how you can monumentally improve your sleep. Today, tonight, and tomorrow, mattressfirm.com/podcast.
One of the rumors and innuendo that make the dirt sheet, specifically the torch, involve Shawn Michaels. Now, we should remind you that Shawn Michaels came back at SummerSlam 2002. So this is his first WrestleMania back that we're about to cover. And Shawn, of course, is a changed man. But here's what the dirt sheets have. Shawn Michaels walked around backstage like he owns the place, says one colleague. During Michaels' WWF title run in the mid-90s, he was literally given keys to Titan Towers in Stamford. Quote, he knows Vince McMahon respects people who don't bow down to him and kiss his ass, and that's never been Michael's style. And even though he's not a top guy and he's not into drugs anymore, he still will walk right into Vince's office without knocking just to get a cup of coffee. It shocks all the other wrestlers to see him conduct himself this way, but Vince doesn't seem to mind. Bruce, we've talked a lot about Shawn, Lord knows, in the last 2 weeks, but their relationship has always been different than just about every other relationship Vince had. Is that fair to say?
I think that it was almost like a father-son relationship in a lot of respects. And I wouldn't say it was really any more different than his relationship with Undertaker either.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that Shawn and Vince had the different relationship? And do you think that Shawn thought anything of just walking into Vince's office to get a cup of coffee? Was he sort of flexing for all the boys to show him his position as far as pecking order goes? Or is that just, their relationship and he didn't think anything of it?
Well, again, that's their relationship. He didn't think anything of it. Vince's coffee was usually better than what was out there for the general public. And like I said, I don't think it's any different than Undertaker. Undertaker walked in without knocking as well. And did the same thing. So I think people looked at Shawn because Shawn did have a cocky arrogance about him that the guys looked at and said, oh my God, look at him. He thinks this shit doesn't stink. And if you're going to feel that way about him, there's really not much you can say that's going to change people's opinions there.
Here's a fun note from the Torch. Tenacious Z, aka Zach Gowen, is telling friends he's not yet signed his WWE contract. The story making the rounds is that Z feels the company is offering him a very low downside guarantee, and he's holding out in hopes that the company will raise their initial offer. Allegedly, they started out at $75,000 a year, and some of Z's friends are defending his stand, with a lot of them saying that maybe he should prove his worth before haggling over money. For what it's worth, according to the Torch, there were still a lot of wrestlers on the main roster who had a $500 a week downside guarantee. What do you recall about negotiations with Zach Gowen? Do you remember him sort of, being difficult to deal with, or a tough negotiator, delusional? What do you remember?
I didn't have to negotiate with him. That was all Johnny A. So I don't know. He was always easy as hell to deal with from my vantage point. And I think that it's just a lot of, rumor and innuendo and dirt sheet gossip and shit. What else did he have? He's making $100 on the independent scene and he's offered anything. That's what used to crack me up. When I would hear these things or read about it in the dirt sheet, you sit there and go, okay, compared to what? What are you negotiating against or for? And the other side of that is, okay, then we offer you nothing. Next. So I just kind of laugh at that when people would bring that up. And I never heard that. And like I said, he was, from my vantage point, especially creative and dealing with him through the times that he was with us, he was always easy to deal with.
It's pretty fun, to hear sort of insight into the way you guys are thinking, because you guys really do have the ultimate, or had the ultimate leverage, like, okay, if this isn't enough money, go do it somewhere else. Like, what's everybody else offering? Because at this point, there's not a lot of options.
And it's still that way.
No, I just meant had, implying, you're fucking persona non grata up there. Not that they have competition, but that, you don't have to carry Triple H's water for him. You just do.
I don't carry anybody's water for him.
Howard Stern challenged Chris Jericho and his band Fozzy to go ahead and go head to head in a celebrity battle of the bands for Stern's band, The Losers. And this happened on a March 4th edition of the Howard Stern Show. They played one of Fozzy's songs, and Howard said something like, their song's not moving. They sound like a hair band. The music doesn't match the vocals. Jericho isn't very good. It's just a boring song. And of course, his sidekick Robin adds, you can really see how one voice can ruin a song. So the next day, Jericho calls in and accepts the challenge. Do you recall, this is one hell of a rub for Fozzy, because at the time, this is before Howard Stern moves to satellite. He is certainly the king of all media here still. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, hell yeah. And just getting mentioned on Howard back in the day was a big thing. Getting him talking about you in any way, shape, or form was good.
Of course, Jericho's still on tour with that band and still with them. Jeff Hardy has dabbled in some music at different times too. What do you remember the reaction from the boys being when you see a Jericho or a Jeff Hardy go out and try their hand at music?
I think that depending upon how good they are is the different reactions. I think some people will roll their eyes, but you look at Jericho and what he's done with Fozzy now. He's been out, he's done the big festivals, he's touring, he's a legit, rock band, man. He's a rock star, and you can roll your eyes at it and laugh at it all you want. But the fact of the matter is he's doing it. He does have a following, and I think people are a little envious of that sometimes when you look at it and go, who the hell does he think he is up on that stage, and all those people cheering and going, Y2J, Fozzy, Fozzy. I witnessed it. I thought it was cool as hell.
Let's talk about Jeff Hardy, because he was also trying his hand at music here, and He goes to JR, the head of talent relations at the time, and asks for every other week off, which JR had to think was suspect at best, but he still grants the request. And doing this, of course, means Jeff is knowingly taking a pay cut, but allegedly WWE sees him as such a big draw and so valuable because he's moving so much merchandise, and he's still getting tremendous reactions from the crowd, especially those of the female variety. Now, the reason for wanting to go every other week is he wants to focus more on his music. And he confirms this in late March on a radio show where he admits he'd rather be in the world's best-selling rock band than to be WWE champion. But he says he still has a passion for wrestling and he doesn't want to leave the business until he becomes world champion. When do you remember it being apparent that Jeff maybe was lacking some of the motivation that maybe his brother had?
When we split him up, and it was always viewed at the time that Jeff was the talent, had the charisma and everything else. And Matt was the solid, dependable one that's always going to be there. So I think if Jeff Hardy could stay at home, do his paintings, do his artwork, build his motocross tracks in his backyard and play music and do nothing else, he would be perfectly content. And play with this little girl and hang out with his wife. Jeff would be the happiest person on the face of the earth. He's a free spirit. Jeff Hardy is the epitome of artist. And he would probably be best described as the wrestling version of Jim Morrison in a lot of ways.
Why do you say Jim Morrison?
Just reading a lot about the Doors and Jim Morrison and kind of his philosophy. Jeff kind of exudes that same kind of philosophy, a very free spirit, likes his poetry, likes his songwriting, likes his art, and likes to just go to the beat of his own drum.
This past week, Jeff Hardy got himself in a little bit of legal trouble. This is not necessarily news when a wrestler maybe behaves badly on a roadway. Do you remember there being a specific time when Vince had like no tolerance for a charge like this? And what was sort of the turning point when some concessions were made? Because it's not nearly as hard and fast it maybe as once was as far as a rule for getting in trouble like this, right?
I think it kind of comes and goes. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's judged on what bad publicity that comes back on the company itself. So when guys are constantly getting in trouble and having these mishaps, look, everybody screws up, and I live in a glass house, so I don't want to throw stones. We all screw up, and we all have our moments where we wish we could have a do-over or another do-over or another do-over. We're human and we screw up sometimes. And I think that Vince realizes that and tries to give everyone the benefit of the doubt as best he can. And sometimes he's human too. He'll get fed up and just say, fuck it, no tolerance. And then it'll be, well, there was a special circumstance. And everybody's different.
To be honest, some of that tolerance has to be, and this is, maybe unfair, but it is reality. Some of that tolerance is determined by your position on the card and your level of contribution to the company. If you're running a traditional company, not a wrestling company, and a new guy on the job gets himself into some trouble, maybe it's easier to get rid of that guy than it is your established guy who's been a great asset to you for a long time.
Absolutely. If you're top salesman that's bringing in, he's writing up orders, 2-3 orders a day, gets into trouble, you're going to help him out before you are the one that maybe turns in one a month.
Yeah.
So,
that's reality.
That's just business. That's reality.
Let's talk about the next SmackDown. Rey Mysterio earns a shot at the Cruiserweight title, beating Tajiri and Jamie Noble. And I feel like I should mention, since we're talking about Jamie Noble, that highlights air on this same SmackDown of Nydia running wild on the Playboy Mansion lawns. And this is happening in the hopes of taking Torrie's spot as the cover girl. Hypothetically, if somebody was cheering her on, what might that sound like, Bruce?
Get on up in there, baby. Go on. Let's get in that grotto. Let's go in that grotto where they got them bubbly waters and we can fart and make our own jacuzzi. Come on, baby. Let's get on up there. I know that Hef's up in there somewhere. He wants to get some on it. Hey, Hef, take a look down on here because you know you want to dive in it, baby. Come on, you about getting lost, you old geezer. Something like that.
You sort of alluded to it earlier. Cena was doing raps everywhere here, and he does one on Brock Lesnar on this episode of SmackDown. And there's rumors running rampant at this time that the rapper Fabulous was supposed to appear at WrestleMania 19 for a rap battle. And allegedly there's some sort of problem on Fab's end with the law, but there's also rumor and innuendo that maybe nobody wanted to do it for fear that the WWE crowd may be inclined to cheer the wrestler rather than the performance, no matter what was said. As an outsider, maybe you're going to get the shit booed out of you either way. Do you remember having conversations with Fabulous or even Jay-Z? Because there is a moment where people start to say, well, hey, maybe Jay-Z will come in. Of course, these days that would seem ridiculous, but back here,
but at the time, at the time it was reality. And we were having conversations with both of them, actually. And we even had conversations with LL Cool J as well about coming in and doing something. It's funny, that rap world, especially then with Cena, there were some that were like, oh man, I'd kill him. Then there were others that were like, well, wait a minute, he may kill me. And they wanted their stuff fairly well scripted out, but everything just broke down. Every time we turned around, we would get one, and I don't remember exactly what happened with Fabulous, but he was the first one, and he was the first one we were talking to about doing something. I don't remember what fell out. Went to Jay-Z. I think there was a scheduling conflict with Jay-Z. LL Cool J, it was just, by that point, it was too late in the game that he wasn't able to free up his schedule. He was doing his television show. And they were recording then, so he couldn't do it. And so we just did the next best thing. Goddamn. We'll wrap to their cardboard cutout. But yeah, that is true. We were negotiating with a few of them.
The same episode of SmackDown has Brock Lesnar get a win over Paul Heyman, inside of a cage match. Of course, he comes into the company a year prior with Paul Heyman as his advocate, and he's a super heel, but now maybe not so much. Roles have reversed a little bit, and allegedly the match is heavily edited before we see the F5 hit on Heyman for the win. Wade Keller would write, originally when Lesnar lifted Heyman, Angle was supposed to enter the ring through the cage door. The door was mistakenly still locked though, and as they scrambled to unlock the door, Lesnar held Heyman upside down in the air for a while, and after about 30 seconds, he just sat Heyman down. Just then, Angle decided to climb the cage rather than wait for the door to be unlocked. And at that point, Lesnar lifted him again just in time for Angle to jump down and interfere. And to the fans in the arena, the whole thing looked like a mess. Do you remember this?
There's another word that I would use for it that I won't say here. It was horrible. And the door couldn't get open. So Kurt decided to climb. It was just terrible. And the idea behind it was short and sweet and get Angle in there and do the angle with Lesnar. But the damn cage door was screwed up and he couldn't get in. But abominable. There's a word. It's close to the other word I wanted to use too. Oh,
I'm going to say the word. The word is abortion. And that word has always been a part of wrestling. And it's sort of weird. I've always wondered, like, how the fuck did this get into wrestling? I mean, there's so much about the wrestling sort of slang.
Well, I'll tell you how, because it's like when you abort something and, like on liftoff, abort. And then when, you should have done something or something was so bad, it was an abortion. It should have been aborted in the very beginning. And it's not really in context to how most people view the word abortion. It's just, abort, get out.
Well, there you go.
It was bad.
It's just weird. It's one of those words. It's like, you even heard Cena recently say on TV, boo-boo face. In real life, boo-boo face is not a thing, but in wrestling, boo-boo face is a thing. And
he got boo-boo face on at the boo.
Let's talk about the next week on Raw. It's March 10th, and Booker T's cutting a promo, and he brings up all the things that Triple H said the previous week about people wanting to see him dance and how people like Booker are here to lose to people like Triple H. And Booker T says something like, my first impulse was to step to this fool, but I chill because I realized one thing. I'm an entertainer, and I entertain each and every one of you 24/7. The each and every one of you is a line we've heard Vince McMahon, I think, insert into promos for years and years. Is that a Vinceism, each and every one of you?
Absolutely. And I don't know, but I bet you that I may have been one of the first ones to use that and maybe overuse it. I used to do that a lot as Brother Love, each and every one of you. But I got that from Vince, and that was something that he would instill. But that was the first time that I ever remember using it and hearing it is when I was doing it. And it probably was there long before me, but that's when I remember it the most.
So Booker goes on to tell his story. He says he's the youngest of 8 kids. He grew up in a single parent household. His father passed when he was very young. He had a lot of trials and tribulations and a lot of heartache. He ran amok with the law, got in trouble. They said his biggest mistake landed him in jail. They put him behind bars. And he said something like, when you step to somebody and you put a gat in their face and tell them, break yourself, you have committed aggravated armed robbery. You see, I sat in that cell and I sat there for a long time, but when I raised up, when I stepped out, I said, Booker T, you got to make a stand or you'll fall for anything. This ain't no Milli Vanilli. This ain't no Vanilla Ice crime story. This is real. And he talks about a Triple H doesn't know anything about him. He hasn't walked in his shoes. He hasn't seen what he's seen, but you want to see me dance? And you said people like me don't win championships. Why don't you walk down the aisle? This of course brings Ric Flair out, who says, Booker, you're no Michael Jordan. You're no Tiger Woods, and you're damn sure not Triple H. 19 months in the big house means you're bad to the bone, man, but you've been dealt a card, not a bad card, but the card just doesn't say world heavyweight champion. And Triple H isn't going to come out here and lower himself to Booker T's level again. And then he says, Nate, take him a message. Next week at Raw in St. Louis, bright lights, big city. You'll have 2 choices. You can meet Triple H when his jet lands in St. Louis and that door opens and the champ and Nate walk down the ramp. You can pick up our bags and carry them down over to that long limousine. You can put on the chauffeur's cap and you can drive us downtown. Then you can take our bags to the building and you'll have done something on that day you're qualified to do. Or you can make the mistake of a lifetime and you can show up next week uninvited and get the ass whipping of a lifetime. Well, you know what's going on there. Booker T goes into Triple H's dressing room, finds him wetting his hair, and he says, you got something to say to me? And Triple H says, yeah, and pulls $1 out of his pocket and throws it at Booker and says, get me a towel. They start brawling. Chat me up, Bruce.
What you want to know?
Carry the bags, put on the chauffeur's cap. Here's $1. I'm in the bathroom.
Heat. You got a heel champion talk to someone that is beneath him, that he feels is beneath him from the Greenwich, Connecticut type heel that we have. That's what it was. It was heat. And I'm not going to defend. I'm not going to get into your racism bullshit and everything else. It is what it is.
Do you remember Hunter ever asking anybody else to get his bags as part of an angle?
Not off the top of my head. I don't.
Okay. Anything else you want to say?
No.
No, I didn't think you wanted any more of that. This is one of my favorite moments in Raw history. The Rock comes out, and this is during his mega heel run here. And some of my favorite stuff from The Rock. He does a song about Cleveland sucks. And of course the hurricane comes in But let's talk a little bit about this version of The Rock, this Hollywood version of The Rock, when he's coming back as a heel and he's doing The Rock sing-alongs and just shitting all over everything in the local arena. This has to be done because The Rock was so witty and so fun for so long that they're going to cheer him no matter what, unless he just directly makes fun of the live crowd, right?
Well, it still goes back to, Vince saying, regardless of him shitting on them, he's shitting ice cream.
Right.
It's tough to get heat.
All right. Good talk, man. So Jerry Lawler hosts a Girls Gone Wild wet t-shirt contest on this episode of Raw. And he has 4 strippers and Stacy Keibler. Chat me up, Bruce. What do you remember about this? How did it come together? Who booked it? Who green-lighted it? This shit would never happen today.
Oh my God. There was a time too that we were looking at, different time, different era, different place. We were looking at possibly doing the Great American Strip Off and going around the country and going to the top strip clubs in the country and doing a pay-per-view event that would be called the Great American Strip Off and crown the world champion stripper, if you will, or the, American championship, maybe doing the UK too in different places. Then you have world champion stripper. So we're experimenting with a lot of different things, and Girls Gone Wild, we had the relationship with Joe Francis from Eric Bischoff and giving them exposure, and man, times change. But it was all about, Joe Francis and giving the Girls Gone Wild stuff some exposure and getting to that pay-per-view that we did later.
How fun is the main event here? Hurricane beats The Rock when Steve Austin distracted The Rock. Austin walks ringside as The Rock's setting up for the people's elbow. So Rock turns his attention to Austin and then is rolled up by Hurricane and pinned. Probably a career moment for Hurricane. One of the coolest moments in Raw. And, we've heard lots of rumor and innuendo that at different times, some of the top guys could be difficult to do business with, The Rock included. The Rock had no problem putting the Hurricane over here, though, did he?
No, not at all. I believe it was Rock's idea. And Rock and Brian Gewirtz, coming up with a story to tell. And he loved putting Hurricane over. It's a great story.
Do you think at the time that putting Booker T in this spot instead of Hurricane may have helped Booker T, or was this beneath Booker T's spot since he's quote unquote in a world title match?
Well, it didn't fit. It doesn't fit to put Booker T in that spot because you're confusing the issue at that point. And then Booker going over Rock doesn't make sense. It was to try and put the underdog in there. Booker wouldn't have been looked at as an underdog in that position. Hurricane was looked at as an underdog. And again, it was the whole Rock dynamic with Hurricane. And that was some entertaining shit.
Oh, it's tremendous.
The underdog.
Some of the best stuff. Around the same time, it comes out in the torch that Kevin Nash is looking to come in shortly after WrestleMania. Supposedly he'd been talking to Vince McMahon saying he wanted to come back as Diesel. And Keller sort of freestyles that this is probably Nash catering to Vince McMahon's egos, since Vince is known to sort of push his own creations. Of course, Diesel doesn't wind up returning until 2011. Do you remember there being discussions here about maybe trying to bring back a silver haired Big Daddy Cool?
It's funny. There was never any consideration on Vince's part ever to bring back a silver-haired Diesel. And Vince hated the silver-haired Kevin Nash and the silver-headed Diesel to boot. That's why when Kevin came back in that Royal Rumble as Diesel, he had him with the brown hair and the brown goatee and everything else. It's just not what Vince saw for Diesel. And so that's probably sounds more like, Kevin Nash just creating his own hype there, so on and so forth. But there was always talk, about bringing Kevin in for different things. As far as silver-haired, that was something Kevin would pitch. Vince never saw it and hated the gray hair. Just thought it made him look old. I think he's a damn handsome man with the gray hair myself.
Let's talk a little bit about pitching ideas, because Tommy Dreamer allegedly pitched an idea that got him removed from the Raw writing team just a couple days after he started. The official line is that Dreamer was removed because the office decided it was a conflict of interest for an active wrestler to work as one of the writers. But a lot of people were saying the real deal is Dreamer was questioning gaps in storyline logic and things of that nature. And people weren't happy about it, specifically Michael Hayes. And they're saying that Michael Hayes maybe even went out of his way to sort of campaign against Tommy Dreamer to get him removed. And Dreamer tries to sort of squash some of this when he's on Bite This. And he says, oh, the reason that I was removed is because I pitched myself as winning every match at WrestleMania. And he puts over the work ethic of McMahon and the writing staff and hope that he got to do it again in the future. But according to the rumor and innuendo, one of the ideas that maybe wasn't met with all smiles is that Rob Van Dam should have been the person to take on Triple H at WrestleMania 19. And when he was told RVD isn't over enough for that spot, Tommy argued about all the RVD signs and the pops that he gets. Do you remember Tommy's short run on the writing staff and why it came to an end?
I can tell you, I was never in one writing meeting ever with Tommy Dreamer present in any way, shape, or form. He may have sat in with the Raw guys for a couple days or so, but as far as him being a active member of the Raw writing team, well, I don't ever remember that. I could see them saying, hey, you want to sit in with us for a few days, or you want to come in and see if maybe this is a fit? I could see that happening. Yes. But I don't, I was never in on any meeting with Tommy Dreamer being a part of it as far as Raw creative or anything like that. And I was doing mainly SmackDown at the time. That's what I say. They may have brought him in and said, hey, Tommy, what do you think about some things? And gotten his input. And he may have thought he was on the creative team, but I never, ever heard that.
William Regal was removed from the road around this time because he's still struggling with the parasite that he had that shut down his lower intestines. So he's receiving some medical treatment, and this thing's been lingering for quite a while. But not everybody's sympathetic, according to the Torch. Quote, you are what's in your stomach, is the joke being told by some of Regal's less than sympathetic colleagues. What do you remember about the parasite, and who did he have heat with to be sort of chatting with Wade this way?
I don't know. Cause I always found Regal to be a stand up, straightforward guy. And it's funny if somebody is friendly with someone in the office, and they must be a stooge. If somebody doesn't like somebody and they talk to Wade Keller, then they're an asshole. Regal busted his ass, I guess, because he showed up to work on time. He did what he was asked to do. He had suggestions and carried himself in a professional manner, which, by the way, he didn't always do. Then you're going to have heat with people. But I remember the parasite, and that was, some bitch damn near died. But it was a tough time for him.
Girls Gone Wild is sort of taking over the company here, and a lot of people with Girls Gone Wild are not pleased with the way it's coming together because they feel like the WWE is sort of overproducing parts of the pay-per-view. And Joe Francis sort of goes into business for himself. And at one point, Eric Bischoff and some other WWE producers just sort of throw their hands up and just scrap the script. But according to the rumor and innuendo, there is an idea that someone floated to Vince McMahon to help promote Torrie Wilson's Playboy. Maybe she should show a breast on the pay-per-view. And he turned it down, concerned that maybe it would hurt her Playboy sales rather than actually helping. Was there a debate as to how much titty was too much titty for drop top titty time?
Drop top titty tipping time.
Well, there's no tipping involved in Playboy, but we'll go with it. Let's talk about drop top titty tipping time here, because this is a ludicrous conversation. And I love the idea that you guys are all sitting around a boardroom and Vince has this furrowed brow and maybe got a pencil in his mouth, and I just don't know the right amount of titty. How much titty's too much titty?
Well, boss, I have found that if you get 3/4 of the areola areal area, then that is enough titty for me. And sometimes only 1/4 of a nip. That's enough to get a rise out you. It is for me. I'm getting a little roused just thinking about it. Dick boss.
I mean, was there a consideration of, goddamn, Torrie, gonna need you to pull up?
No, our girls were not going to do any of that. The fact that he even had them involved was a stretch in and of itself. Thank God I did not get nominated to go down and produce in any way, shape, or form the Girls Gone Wild pay-per-view. It is one of the most frustrated times I could ever remember just listening to Eric Bischoff talk about it. For the production team members that went down, they were like, oh my God, it was insanity. And I think my favorite one is the discussion of Snoop Dogg talking to Kevin Dunn, and Snoop Dogg shows up like an hour and a half late for the whole production and everything. And the cops have already come in and said, hey, look, if there's any hint of drugs back here, if there's any smell of marijuana, if there's any hint that there may be something going on back here, we're arresting everybody. Everybody's going to jail. And there better not be any underage girls and blah, 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 blah. So everybody's worried about Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg shows up late, and he, is in rare form, allegedly. And I guess Kevin goes to speak with Snoop Dogg. And while Kevin is talking to him, Kevin's getting louder and louder, and Snoop is just turned away from Kevin. And Kevin's getting frustrated trying to talk to Snoop Dogg, and Snoop Dogg comes back with the one of my best comebacks I've ever heard is just because I ain't looking at you, motherfucker, doesn't mean I ain't listening to you. And that was the quote of the entire show from everybody. Was like just hilarious, and Snoop Dogg just went on and did his own thing anyway. But I was thankful I was not a part of that little debacle, and it's probably one of the funniest Eric Bischoff story, just listening to him being frustrated over the whole thing as it went on was kind of funny as well.
The March 13th edition of SmackDown, we would see Jamie Noble removed from the grounds of the Playboy Mansion.
Yes, he was. That, and for a shoot, that guy, the head of security for the Playboy Mansion, was ready to have Jamie arrested. And he's like, hey, Bruce is one over here telling me to hit the damn doorbell. I'm just hitting the doorbell. You can't do that to me. Come on, baby. Get them titties out. Show half your titties. Come on, baby. Show them how pretty they are. Baby, I like that.
Speaking of that, on this same episode of SmackDown, Sean O'Hare is backstage, and he convinces Dawn Marie that it would be a good idea to show her breasts to the crowd. What can you tell us about this? Who booked this shit?
The Svengali Sean O'Hare. That was Vince's idea, that he could talk people into doing, things that they didn't want to do. And, oh God, obviously didn't work.
There's lots of promos here about Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan. And in a prior episode, they even had a debate, but they're really trying to hype this up. I'm curious, when did you guys know the decision for WrestleMania is going to be Vince and Hogan? Obviously by February and March, you knew, but did you know 6 months out, 3 months out? And who suggests Vince McMahon is the right opponent for Hulk Hogan?
Well, for me, that was a big part of bringing Hulk back, because as big as Austin and McMahon was, the idea was to get, the ultimate for nostalgia purposes would be Vince and Hogan, because it was the ultimate heel and Vince McMahon against the ultimate babyface from yesteryear in Hulk Hogan. And I thought it was important to get to that match. So in my head, we were always going to that. That was a big thing of getting Hulk back and pitching that idea. He wanted to do it. He being Hulk wanted to do it fairly soon. And I was like, God, no, build to this. And let's get to WrestleMania with it. I thought it was a WrestleMania match.
Let's talk about the match that happens here between Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. Angle has his hood over his head, and Brock jumps him from behind, hits the F5, and he covers him. but he gets off of him and looks down confused. And then Haas and Benjamin distract him. Kurt rolls in and trades places with his brother Eric, and then small packages Brock for the pin in about 90 seconds. And then Kurt runs out, but Brock grabs Eric and F5s him into the post. Now, originally the plan was going to be that Brock would beat Kurt quickly for the title because of how bad Kurt's neck was. But then Kurt does his sell job and convinces everybody he can do one more match at WrestleMania. So they do this angle instead. And I thought this was really, really well done. What do you remember about this angle?
Well, I remember going back and the first time seeing Eric and thinking about, we'd used him with Undertaker and some different things. And it was, like I said, Kurt did a hell of a sell job and felt that he's been hurting all this time. He's been working with it, and he knows that if he's careful that he can have the match. And he felt that it was important that Brock win the championship at WrestleMania, and he wanted to give that to him. So, we'll do it. But it was also a way just throw a little bit more heat on that match with Kurt, getting that pin on Brock, letting you know, hey kid, I can take you at anytime I want to. And that was feeding into that whole thing of if Brock were in his prime and Kurt were in his prime, who would win? And that's what we were building up for this whole match.
Hypothetically, if Kurt would have dropped the belt right there, what would you guys have done with Brock?
Like I said, we talked about everything under the sun from Benoit. We even talked about Eddie. We talked about Taker, Big Show. We thought about having a tournament for the damn title. We talked about having a three-way with, Undertaker and Big Show involved in it. A lot of different things. I mean, every scenario under the sun, but there was never one, that's what we're going to do. By the time that Kurt came back to us and said he's going to do the match.
Backstage around this time is when we finally have the Ric Flair Eric Bischoff confrontation. We've covered this in great detail on our Bischoff episode. But that same episode is where we see Paul Heyman and Brian Gewirtz get suspended for 2 weeks. What do you remember about maybe the most eventful week of backstage bullshit in the history of WWE?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I wasn't in the building when Flair and Bischoff got into it. And I remember getting a phone call, I think from Jerry Briscoe, and said, hey, your children got into a fight, because I always produced everything with Eric and Rick back then. So my wife was in the hospital and I was flying out in the afternoon to go to St. Louis. I'm like, oh man, what happened? And, I was getting bits and pieces of it. And I finally got a hold of Eric before I got on the plane. And I said, what happened? He said, I don't know. I mean, he told me his version of it. He was in on the phone and Rick came in and started throwing punches, and he got his hands up and didn't know why Rick was mad. And apparently they got together with Vince and everything was fine and Rick was fine and everything was good. So right after that, I believe I talked to Stephanie and she says, yeah, when you get here, just get them together and run their night through with them. And I got them together. We did pre-tapes that night together and it was like nothing ever happened. So it was, it was a little surreal. The Brian and Paul thing, like we talked about, that was kind of like a pinch fight, but it was ridiculous. I say pinch fight. I don't think they even touched each other or anyone even raised a hand other than Paul coming around the corner like he was going to do something and Brian not backing down from him. So, Pete, Irish Pete, not Doherty, but, oh my gosh, he'll probably send me a text after this saying you screwed up my name. But Irish Pete got in the middle of them, and before we knew it, whatever was going to happen was all done. So it was much ado about nothing, pretty much on both parts. But the funniest part was in St. Louis, I'm getting there, I'm expecting all this tension, and both guys were like, okay, what are we doing? shook hands at the end of the night. Thank you. And everything was great.
Well, let's talk about the next week on Raw. We see, Triple H and Ric Flair. This is from the Torch. Cut a promo that was void of the racial slurs they've been throwing at Booker T. Instead, Jerry Lawler on commentary made a comment about Booker T likely being in jail. And then Goldust walked to the ring and stood up for Booker. Triple H and Rock then attacked Goldust, which led to Booker running out to make the save. Why did you guys decide to make Booker T's stint in prison part of a storyline?
Because it was real. And it was something, you know, I don't know if Booker's book had already come out or was coming out. I know shortly after, but he was in the process of it. And it was out there. You know, it was out there. You got a mug shot and you've got a record. Everybody wants to go, oh, this is a terrible person, this terrible person. You know, Booker had paid his debt to society and he'd really turned his life around. And it was a pretty damn positive message and a good story that he was at the bottom. He had committed a horrible crime. He did his time and he's come out and he's a stand-up person after that. And you too can, you know, if you screw up, man, it doesn't have to be the end of your life. So it was a real life story and one that he wanted to get out there.
On this same show, we see Chris Jericho cut a very serious promo about his desire to end the legacy of Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. Then he would team with Christian to beat Scott Steiner and Test, who had Stacy Keibler with him. Jericho is probably somebody who grew up wanting to be like Shawn Michaels, right?
Yeah. He patterned his whole damn career after it in a lot of respects, even going back to the, tag team with Lance Storm and Smoky Mountain. You know, that was their version of the Rockers, and Chris wanted to be Shawn Michaels and Lance would be Marty Jannetty. So he looked up to him and he was a big fan of Shawn growing up.
The main event of that show is Steve Austin beating Eric Bischoff in a no DQ match. And afterwards, The Rock hits the rock bottom on Austin and steals his beer. But there's commentary in the Torch about Steve Austin I want to go through here. Here's what Wade wrote. Steve Austin's return hasn't exactly set the world on fire. His performances thus far have been lackluster in every way imaginable. He hasn't even hit a double behind the mic. Wow. Much less the expected home run by now headed into WrestleMania. We really only know about Rock's motivation for the feud, that he's never defeated Austin at WrestleMania, but we haven't heard anything about what is motivating Austin. Is it his past hatred of Eric Bischoff? Well, he's already kicked Bischoff around the ring twice, once on pay-per-view and once on national cable TV. For Austin to connect with fans and frankly to become motivated himself, he needs a specific motivation to drive his on-air character. That's what made his initial main event run in WWE so awesome, his obsession with McMahon, or perhaps better put, dealing with McMahon's obsession with him. He was the beer-swilling, deer-hunting, blue-jean-wearing common man whom fans reveled in seeing beat up the rich, suit-wearing, snobbish, probably pedicured Vince McMahon. But you can see the apathy in Austin's face. He's acting, not feeling. He's just going through the motions of who he thinks he needs to be rather than just being himself. Unless himself today is just a shell of his former self. The lack of spark in Austin may be because he's depressed over the deteriorated condition of his neck. He was motivated to come back full time and help WWE out of their current doldrums. And now that his neck likely can't handle a full-time house show schedule, he can't be the all around MVP he wanted to be. Do you agree with this assessment of Steve here, that he really wasn't feeling it here and a lot of it had to do with his neck and his work showed that?
In hindsight, yes. However, at the time, no. And I think that, you know, we were looking at it, we were getting to the Rock Austin 3 and it felt big and it felt good to us. And there was a buzz about it. In hindsight, going back and looking at it, yeah, he was a step off and he maybe wasn't the Steve Austin of old, but that comes with injuries and that happens after a while. But I think, hindsight looking at it, yeah, I can see that definitely.
You guys did something on TNN called Third Degree, which was an all interview format that featured Steve Austin, Triple H, and Hulk Hogan. It goes down on March 23rd. And the show was broadcast live from the building that used to be The World. and the wrestlers were interviewed mostly in character by Michael Cole and Taz. But Steve Austin did break character a little bit to talk about the events that led to the return that he had to the company. In one breath, he's talking about his feud with Eric Bischoff, but in another, he's talking about the secret meeting he had with Vince McMahon to work out their differences. And Triple H kind of broke out of character when he denied using the racial overtones. And McMahon had been advertised for this show, but Michael Cole read a statement that said he didn't want to kill Hulkamania prior to WrestleMania, so he wouldn't be there. What do you remember of this TNN Third Degree? Is this something Vince tries to put together to get some more press and push for WrestleMania, or was TNN calling just thirsty for more content?
No, first of all, they were always thirsty for more content, but it was an opportunity to take that offer and be able to use it to plug WrestleMania. And it was an idea that Vince had to just be able to put guys to give that shoot feel about, hey, here the guys are and be real with it. So it's, an attempt, and sometimes guys are a little uncomfortable breaking their character, but then when you break in and out of it, it's kind of hard. It's like Dixie Carter when she was a heel on TV, and then she would go on Twitter and she would be a heel about storyline stuff, and then a babyface to fans tweeting her. It's tough for the audience to differentiate sometimes.
It comes out here in the dirt sheets that King of the Ring is going away, and it's going to be replaced by Bad Blood. King of the Ring, of course, debuted in 93. Why did you guys scrap it in 03?
Why did we scrap King of the Ring? Because Vince was tired of it, didn't like the tournament concept, and wanted to try something else. There was also a big push for, God, what was it? Help me out. The summertime WCW pay-per-view, the Great American Bash.
Yeah.
That we really wanted to do. We owned it. We wanted to do a Great American Bash, and Vince just didn't like it, but he hated the tournament concept, and he knew he just wanted to scrap King of the Ring.
It comes out around this time that Kevin Kelly is out of the company, to quote, pursue other opportunities, according to your brother Tom on Bite This. That's the official reason. But Wade Keller says he's heard he was actually laid off. Kevin Kelly, who many people remember as Hermie, thanks to The Rock, had been working as a co-host on Bite This and was also a producer for Confidential, but Finkel replaced Kelly on Bite This that week. What was Kevin Kelly doing? Why was he out here? What's the real scoop?
Well, best I remember, Kevin was doing play-by-play, and I actually thought Kevin was a pretty damn good play-by-play host. He didn't have the look Vince wanted. He's rotund. Okay, well, we all are. And there was also his other duties were in talent relations, and he was helping JR out during the time, working with developmental talent, doing some other things with the WWF.com. But I think it was just a cost-cutting measure, and Johnny coming into that position and cutting costs, and some people had to go, and Kevin got caught up in that. Nothing personal. It was just, cuts had to be made, and there were other people that could do his job, so they made the cuts.
It's announced here that Shark Boy was scheduled to work 6 matches for the WWE in April, but he hadn't yet been given a contract, so it was probably just tryout matches. Of course, Shark Boy doesn't get a deal. Why didn't Shark Boy get a contract here, Bruce?
Are you ribbing me?
No.
Because he's a shark.
Well, it's a gimmick. It's a gimmick, yo.
Yeah, Dean's actually a hell of a trainer, but just the body, it just didn't work. And the gimmick was something that Vince wasn't really interested in. And I think Dean was really wanting to do the Shark Boy gimmick. And me personally, I love the Shark Boy gimmick. I found it even more entertaining when he was doing the Steve Austin knockoff Shark Boy gimmick. I found him highly entertaining, but Vince didn't, and he didn't see anything that he could do with the Shark Boy gimmick. Just thought it was kind of silly. Let's make him a plumber.
Let's talk about Hulk Hogan. He's on Regis and Kelly on March 19th. He's there to promote his book and, of course, WrestleMania. And when Regis asked if he could beat Stone Cold in a match, Hogan says yes. Was Hogan always campaigning for that match at WrestleMania with Austin? Because it certainly feels like even when we covered our show a few weeks ago from 2003, that he's really pushing for this.
Well, I think that anytime that you're put in that position, you're out in the public and they're going to ask you that question. What do you say? No, I think he'd beat me. No, I don't want to have that match. There's no other way to answer that than to say, yeah, I'd kill him. I'd beat his ass.
Let's talk about Chris Jericho. He's doing lots of tours to promote WrestleMania and his Fozzy CD. He lands a spot on the Late Late Show with Craig Kilborn on March 18th. Then on the 19th, he's on Fox Sports Net's Best Damn Sports Show, period. And he sort of takes other athletes to task for taking off so much time for injuries. And he says something like, I would be fired from WWE if I were to call Vince McMahon and use those same injury excuses as those athletes. These days, of course, that would not be well received. But in those days, it certainly felt like in the wrestling business, you had to suck it up, kid, right?
Well, also, hang on though. It's also a heel talking about how wrestling is so much tougher than any other sport and saying, I'd go out. What's he got? A torn meniscus. I went out with 2 broken legs, and he's staying in character and being a heel and putting himself in the wrestling business over.
Well, but the main event is a guy who's is being held together by duct tape and really probably shouldn't be wrestling.
That's true too. And again, that's the business. I'm saying as far as the interview and that comment, that's what you would say in that regard. And you're putting your sport over any other sport. And you're talking about how tough it is. So you always want to portray that picture. And in real life, yeah, you're going to want to go out there, and that was the way, man. You taped up and went out, get the match in the ring.
Shots from Torrie Wilson's Playboy spread become available online on March 19th. And this is a full week ahead of the issue being on newsstands. What's the reaction in the locker room when one of their colleagues has drop top titty tipping time?
Happy. Happy. Torrie's pictorial in Playboy was positively tremendous. Beautiful lady, still is to this day. And I think everybody was clamoring for copies of it. I've got an autographed copy of it in my office.
The page just stuck. Never mind. March 20th. We see on SmackDown, Bob Costas talk about the Hogan McMahon match, and he compares them to an old timers game in baseball. I find this kind of funny because a couple of years prior to this, there was a very famous confrontation on Costas' show between Vince and Bob. What do you remember about Bob here in 03? Was he the smug asshole we all know him to be from our XFL episode?
Oh, Bob. I always got along with Bob. Bob was always really nice to me. And Bob Costas was always a huge wrestling fan and more so a WWF fan. The altercation with him and Vince about the XFL was real. And that was something that, that after the fact, however many months later, they both apologized and moved on from it. But, Bob could be kind of condescending and very smug. After all, he did real sports. He did baseball. So that's just who Bob Costas is. And personally, he's a pretty good guy, a nice guy. And I always knew him to be a big fan of the wrestling business.
The same episode, we see the Los Guerreros vignette on a golf course. Pretty famous vignette from the SmackDown era here. What do you remember about these? Did you shoot or produce these vignettes on the golf course?
I didn't shoot them. We wrote them out ahead of time in the production team. There was a vignette team at that time that would go out and shoot the vignettes themselves. And it was a lot of that input and a lot of that stuff came from Chavo and from Eddie. So we just used it and pretty much went absurd as we could and had a lot of fun with that stuff. We wrote them out. We kind of outlined them and they went out and shot them, and the talent was able to improvise and do a lot of stuff. If you remember, they were cut together big time. So they had a lot of cuts in them and there was a lot of stuff that was used. and not used just to make the very best vignettes we could.
Bobby Heenan appears on this episode as well, and he's really trying to put over Hulk versus Vince. This is coming at a time when we haven't seen a lot from Bobby Heenan. How was he feeling at this point, and how'd you guys get him to agree to do this?
Just asked him. It was trying to go back and capture that era of Hulk and Hulkamania when it was big, and one of Hulk's obvious biggest rivals was the Heenan family. And we were looking to do more things with Bobby. I believe they were doing a DVD on Bobby at the time and getting him to do some other things. So it was natural. Hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we also get you to comment on the Hulk Vince match as well? So this is a combination of things we did with him at the time.
Let's talk a little bit about the contract signing that happened on this show. This is the most memorable thing that built up to WrestleMania, at least for me. Mean Gene's here, and he brings out Hulk Hogan to sign his contract against Vince McMahon at WrestleMania. And then Vince shows a pre-taped walking segment on the Titantron and then appears behind Hogan and beats on him with a chair. Vince signs the contract, and then he makes Hogan sign with his own blood. Pretty violent way to do this. Whose idea was it, and how do you think it came off?
It was Vince's idea. Well, actually, Vince's idea. He loves the damn contract signings. It was Hogan's idea to sign in his blood and to get the color and have Vince do the whole thing in his own blood. That was something that Hogan wanted to do, and that was his input to that. Vince loves those big contract signings because it makes it feel big. In his regard, after a while, it becomes very predictable.
Right.
Something's going to happen. It's like, okay, here's the contract signing. What's the angle going to be? So, that's what it was, but it was good. It was violent as hell. Jeez, this whole, that whole build up and that match and everything about it was violence in a way you couldn't do today. And it was I don't want to say excuse, but the excuse was, well, what else can they do? They're limited in everything that they can do. So we turned to violence.
Let's talk about the go home edition of Monday Night Raw here on our way to WrestleMania. Austin opens the show, and this night there's no traditional entrance ramp in Sacramento. And he says he's upset about The Rock's treatment, and he's staging a sit-in until The Rock comes out, and even requests a song. Well, eventually Test and Stacy come out. Test gets stunned. Lance comes out and calls out the ref to make the pin on Test, but Austin does it instead and then stuns him too. And then Bischoff comes out with cops and a restraining order, and Austin leaves without a fight as Bischoff hypes the Rock concert, and The Rock sings Jailhouse Rock as Austin is leaving. Let's fast forward.
It would have been better if he sang?
I'm ready.
If he would have said, hey, Steve, you know how I spent my day today? Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
Triple H and Ric Flair are taking on Booker T and Goldust here. The pedigree is reversed into a catapult, and then an axe kick on Triple H gets the pin. So if you're familiar with the formula, if Booker T got the pin here, it's coming to WrestleMania. Chris Jericho comes out for the pre-WrestleMania hype interview, and he asks Shawn to join him man on man. And Jericho admires Shawn's video package from last week and talks about how he wanted to be Shawn growing up. And we even get footage of Jericho's debut match, and they sort of compare and contrast the two. And he says he grew out of it, and now he wants to be himself because he's better than Shawn. And Jericho talked about how he wanted to grow up to be Shawn, but Shawn's only 5 years older than Jericho. Today, Chris is 47 and Shawn's 52. But certainly Shawn was the trailblazer here. This had to be a big thrill for Jericho to be working with him.
It was a big thrill. And, regardless of the age difference, still Shawn was first, and Shawn was the guy that Chris emulated and wanted to be like. It was a huge thrill. And this thing, the other part about it, this wasn't supposed to last to WrestleMania. I think this was supposed to be, like one or two match and be done with it. But they had such chemistry and it was working and they were clicking so well that made it all the way to WrestleMania with it.
Rock comes out for the concert at the end of the show or towards the end of the show. And he's singing about the fat women in Sacramento and just really getting great heat here. And outside, an ambulance pulls in, and this allows Austin to drive the truck into the arena, and Rock calls out to the cops. But of course, Austin drives right into the arena. And it turns out to be the Hurricane who gets hauled off by the cops. And then Austin appears from the back of the truck and hits the ring to get his revenge. Pretty fun little finish. We didn't really talk about this version of The Rock very much though. So I want to ask, whose idea was it to have The Rock start singing? This feels like a Brian idea.
It was actually a Rock idea, and Rock used to love to, sing, and he would play his guitar. And there was a period there where he had I want to say it was a Willie Nelson signed guitar that Willie had given him, was carrying around. So he would go out and he would do, whatever, went out and sang. It was a way to entertain the live audience and not have to do a whole hell of a lot. So he could go out in live events. Shit, he'd put in 10 minutes singing and doing gaga before the match would ever begin. And also at the end of the night for television tapings, he would always grab the mic and do a song. And there was the period where he and Steve were doing sing-offs and going back and forth for the TV shows. At the end of the TV shows in the dark, that's how we came up with that segment that time where they actually did the sing-off in the ring. Wasn't nearly as good as the stuff that they did improv before that. It was when I learned that stepped on a pop top, ruined my flip, whatever I did. I fucked up my flip flop. Anyway, I just fucked up that line, but that's the first time I knew what that line was in the Jimmy Buffet song.
Jimmy Buffet. What do you think of this build to WrestleMania 19? Obviously it's the most important feud probably in the history of the WWE. And you could even say the biggest feud in the history of wrestling, with Rock and Austin at 3 WrestleManias. And it only happened at the odd years, 15, 17, and 19. How would you compare and contrast the builds? I enjoyed The Rock's work here, but it didn't feel like it was the same as it had been in the past for Austin. I thought Austin was the better performer at 15. I thought they were both probably at the top of their game at 17, but I did think The Rock had even gotten a step better by 19 of the 3 in the builds to the match, not the actual events themselves. How do you think 19 stacked up against 15 and 17?
Probably the third best of the trilogy. As far as the whole build for the show, WrestleMania, the overall event, I thought the build for Brock and Kurt was excellent. I thought the build for Vince and Hulk was excellent. And I thought the build for Steve and Rock was good. Looking back on it, it was an okay, build getting up to it, but the overall show was excellent. I mean, it was good and everything meant something, but, I thought that the main matches, the money matches were done very well as far as the builds, telling those stories, getting into it.
Let's get to WrestleMania, man. We're like over 2 hours here, like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh, hell, I thought we were wrapping up.
No, we're just now getting going. We're finally here. But we had so much to build to here. On Sunday Night Heat before WrestleMania, Chief Morley and Lance Storm retained the World Tag Team titles over Kane and Rob Van Dam with an assist from the Dudleys. Why was it this match on WrestleMania? I mean, it feels like RVD's one of your most popular guys in the company. The tag titles are on the line, not even on the main card.
You can only do so much, and something's got to give. It's funny. I was talking to somebody that was on the Raw writing team, and we were like, how was that decision made? And Vince ended up just making it. There was not a match that was, this is definitely a Heat match.
Right.
That just didn't happen. It's something had to be on Heat, and something had to open up the show. So that was the match that got the nod. And it was not because it was a lesser than match in any way, shape, or form. It was a great match to open up for the live audience, and it was a great match for Heat to get people excited about WrestleMania. So, somebody's got to start, somebody's got to finish.
What'd you think of the opening package? A really cool little video talking about how important WrestleMania is. Lots of footage of the guys, sort of B-roll footage that they used for many, many years. I thought was really well put together. There's the shot of Angle from underneath, and, well, you know what we're talking about. Really iconic shots that were done during this time. When did you guys shoot those? What did you think of the video? How far in advance is an opening video like this for WrestleMania complete?
Dude, it's not complete usually until a day or two before the show itself. I mean, they're shooting stuff up until the very last minute. But what I love is the iconic pictures that you see throughout that. I love going back and seeing the old timers and telling that history of WrestleMania and of the WWF, because that's what WrestleMania is all about. And I just thought it was another great, production piece. I enjoy watching that stuff a lot of times, more so than I do the matches.
I did too. I think most of our listeners do as well. Let's talk about the matches though. We've got the Cruiserweight Championship on the line, and one heck of an opener. We've got Matt Hardy version 1 with his little MFer, Shannon Moore, defending the title against Rey Mysterio. Mysterio's here in a Daredevil themed outfit. Ultimately, the match only goes about 5.5 minutes before, what do you know, the heel champion Matt Hardy gets the win. Why was the match so short? What'd you think of the match?
I thought that the match was great. I thought it told a nice story, and it was a perfect way to open that damn thing up, man. They came out, they tore the house down, and they got the hell out of Dodge. Simple, clean heel finish in that, 1, 2.5, and he hooks the bottom rope and he got the hell out of Dodge. I just, from a producer standpoint, watching that going, man, there was nothing wrong with that. It opened up WrestleMania on a high note with Ray's whole entrance and the pop out of the gimmick, and I thought it was great.
It is sort of interesting that just a few years after this, I guess 3 years later, Rey Mysterio is going to go from the opening match at WrestleMania to winning the world title at WrestleMania 22. What do you think of the Matt Hardy version 1 character, and how would somebody have explained that to Vince? Because there's no way he knew, right?
It was, Jeff was a star, man. Jeff was what everybody was talking about, and Jeff was a big thing. What do we do with Matt? See if he has any ideas. And Matt had this idea of the version 1 and the whole, that thing called the internet that was just starting up during that time and getting kind of big. So he pitches this idea and he pitched it to the creative team. I don't know that Vince really understood it. However, the guys at the studio, the younger guys at the studio, the younger producers at the studio, they got the concept, and they like doing the Matt likes to eat sushi cooked medium well, that kind of stuff that they had on the side during all of Matt's entrances. And Vince felt that, okay, if the younger guys get it, I don't have to get it.
Right.
Just go do it and do it well. And he would, okay, I don't understand it, but they get it and they like it. Go ahead and do it.
How fun is it too, that I believe this is the first time a Hardy ever won a match at WrestleMania. Of course, the Hardy Boys had been in WrestleManias for several years at this point. This is the first time they get a victory. I mean, it's a featured spot to be in the opening match at WrestleMania, even though, traditionally old school wrestling folks might say, it's the curtain jerker, but the first match at WrestleMania,
hate that attitude.
Still a pretty damn big deal, is it not?
It's a huge deal. And, I didn't know it was the first time that they ever won. That's crazy. Maybe that is where he broken that record.
Oh God, let's move on.
No.
Next up, we see the Miller Lite Catfight girls arrive, and they argue over what the real main event is. What can you tell us about the Miller Lite Catfight girls?
Well, they paid money for that spot to have the Miller Catfight girls. It was a promotion with Miller Lite, obviously. And if you go back You ever watch 2.5 Men?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember the redhead Candy?
No.
That was Alan. It was Charlie's girlfriend first, then Alan's girlfriend. Then Alan ended up marrying her.
No.
It's in reruns right now, and she's a big part of the show, and I watch it when I fall asleep at night. One of the Miller Lite girls looked just like Candy when I was going back and watching this stuff and going, oh my God.
You just sidebar all of that for that bullshit? How about a wrestling story, motherfucker?
I did. No one knew. This is, again, when people critique creative, they say, why did they put the Miller Lite girls in there? That's stupid. Because they paid us money.
Right.
So we didn't like it as much as you didn't like it. All right. However, the fact that they paid us money, we love it. So you got to write them in and things, and you just have to give them exposure and try and do it the least offensive way you possibly can.
Which one of the boys were most excited to see them there?
Probably A-Train.
Roll Tide. Before the show on Sunday Night Heat, Big Show and A-Train took out Nathan Jones. So that creates a bit of a handicap match, because with Nathan Jones out, now we've got the Undertaker taking on the Big Show and A-Train by himself. Why was the decision made to take Nathan Jones out of the match beforehand? Can I freestyle a guess?
Sure you can. Go ahead.
You didn't want to risk him fucking up the match, so less is more.
Exactly. We wanted to have a passable match, and felt that with him out there looking lost, that it would not have been good. So let's limit it to 2 moves and pray that it works, but put the spotlight where it needs to be. And that was on the Undertaker.
We get Limp Bizkit here to perform Rollin' live for the Undertaker's entrance. And
Rolling.
how would Jim Cornette sing that song?
Rolling, motherfucker.
Undertaker rides the bike down. He's got the American flag on the back of the bike. One of the cooler entrances of Undertaker's career at WrestleMania, right?
Actually, yeah. You know, the thing about it was, to me, is if you watch Undertaker when he comes down the ramp, when he guns the bike, because that was always funny to me. The guy, you could tell the guys that could ride, and like you go back and watch DOA, how they'd be hitting that brake and shit. Undertaker and Austin on vehicles was absolutely terrifying to me, because where most people would slow down is where they would speed up. And just watching Taker take the corners and the people getting out of the way and just so damn crisp and all that other shit, I was like going, geez, man, why do you have to do it on the biggest stage of all, where you can wipe out and more people can see it? But he didn't. Some bitch could ride.
Pretty fun match here for what it is. I think it's a lot better than a lot of people may have expected. A-Train almost has like a breakout performance in this for me. I remember at the time watching it and being beforehand just kind of but after this being like, damn, it was actually pretty fucking good.
You know, I think everybody should go back and watch this. It was fucking good. And I am watching this saying to myself, oh God, in my head, it was a stinker.
Right.
When it happened, I'm thinking this is going to suck. Oh my God. But when it actually, the match was great. I mean, it was logical. It told a good story. And like you said, man, I'm sitting there going, God, why Matt Bloom, A-Train, wasn't a bigger star just baffles me, because he could move for a big man. I thought he had a good look.
Right.
But there was just something missing with him. And we tried, man. We really tried. And there were a lot of people that felt that he could have been a big star, but there was just something that missed, that never really clicked to get over to that next level.
Eventually, when it looks like all hope is lost for the Undertaker, Nathan Jones comes down and gives a spin kick to the Big Show in the aisle. And then eventually does a run into the ring and delivers a kick to A-Train. And then Taker hits A-Train with the tombstone and gets the pin. And then we get the celebration of the Undertaker with the American flag at WrestleMania. It's an interesting time when Rey Mysterio is in your opening match, Big Show and Undertaker are in your second match. What a fucking roster, huh? What did you think overall of the Undertaker's position here at WrestleMania?
Well, that tells you how stacked that the roster is when that's what you end up with. But when we would do the lineups for WrestleMania, again, what most people would traditionally go, oh, it's only the second match on the card. That's not how we looked at it. We looked at attractions and we looked at pacing of a show and getting big stars out there. What it does to the audience is it tells you, don't leave your seat. Don't leave the screen because anything can happen at any time. So it's just a different way of looking at it. And that's how we tried to program it, tried to do the lineup like you would a movie. And you keep people glued to the set.
Somebody who wasn't glued to the company is Jones. He would be sent to OVW not long after this and wound up quitting in December of 2003. Overall, why don't you think it was a hit? Was he just not athletically gifted? He just didn't get wrestling. It wasn't the look. It wasn't the size.
No, the look and the size were there. I think it was the mentality. And I don't think that he ever really understood the psychology of the business. Big tough guy, big strong son of a bitch. And in his head, I think he felt he should have been a much bigger star and should have just been able to come in and be on top. And there was probably a period, like if he was around during the Hulk Hogan days in the late 80s, you could have brought him in and gone around the horn 2-3 times with Hogan.
You know, I'm glad you said that because I was like, if you would have plopped him in 87, 88, he'd have been fine.
Yeah. And it would have drawn a lot of money, but now I think the audience was expecting a whole hell of a lot more.
What we were expecting were the Miller Lite Catfight girls to run into Torrie Wilson and Stacy Keibler.
While the two girls, Stacy Keibler and Torrie, are reading Playboy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Next up, women's evolution, baby. We see a triple threat match for the women's championship with Trish Stratus, Jazz, and Victoria. What's your favorite Jazz match, Bruce?
My favorite Jazz match or
Yeah.
Chaz?
What's your favorite Jazz match?
This had to be right up there. I always liked Jazz, man. She was a hell of a talent. Tough. And also her husband, Rodney Mack, Red Dog, was another one. But again, they were great in the ring, great people. There was just something missing on that connection with the audience. But her in-ring stuff, man, was solid as hell. And I thought that the match was pretty damn good.
Eventually, Victoria hits the ropes and runs into a chick kick, which gives Trish the win and the title at 7 minutes and 17 seconds. Trish is your new women's champion. You guys opted to have this on the main show and not on the pre-show because you wanted to really feature Trish, right?
Well, yeah, you wanted to have the women's championship on the main show, and yes, we wanted to feature Trish.
I'm just saying, if this was Victoria and Jazz, the tag match is on the show and they're on heat.
Well, you wanted to have the girls on the show as well. So that was a big part of being on the show. And we had another tag match on the show. So unfortunately one of them had to go.
Coach interviews The Rock here, and The Rock says he doesn't care what people think. He's here to do what he hasn't done before. And that's beat Steve Austin at WrestleMania. And if Hollywood's taught him anything, it's that the first act and the second act don't matter. The climax is what everyone remembers. And that's in Act 3, and that's tonight. This wasn't the silly, funny, Rock, but I thought this was a great promo as a heel. Don't you?
It was an excellent promo. And who wrote that? I'll give a shout out. Brian Gewirtz.
Next up, we got the tag team titles on the line when Los Guerreros are out there with, Chris Benoit and Rhino and Team Angle. Of course, Team Angle are the tag champs. This is an underrated match, man. And, they don't get nearly as much time as you might imagine. Only 8 minutes and 47 seconds. The finish comes when Eddie pulls Rhino to the floor, but Shelton comes in and pins Chavo to retain the titles. It's pretty amazing to think about that here Benoit and Eddie are against each other in a big tag team match. But the next year at WrestleMania, at the end of the show, they're both standing there holding world titles just 1 year later. What can you tell us about this triple threat tag team match that I really enjoyed?
Well, it was a great match, and looking at the what we were trying to do here was really give credibility, because we're losing Kurt after WrestleMania. Wanted to give credibility to Haas and Benjamin, who we had a lot of high hopes for. Both young guys, great talents, and just trying to put them in a position to, even without Kurt, they've got the championship and have credibility. Geez, just watching the talent in there. And I always love, we talked about Chavo and Eddie before, and how underrated Chavo was for being in the right place at the right time. Everybody involved in that match, superb. I just watched it. Like I said, I kept wanting to find something I could fast forward through, and I would find myself just watching mesmerized, going, shit, this is good.
Next up, we see Stacy, Torrie, and the Catfight Girls, and Stacy and Torrie are arguing over who made WrestleMania, Hogan or McMahon. And the Catfight Girls decide they need to settle this argument in bed. What the fuck is this?
Well, we gave them a lot. We gave them a lot of verbiage there. We gave them a lot of lines. Hogan, McMahon, Hogan, McMahon. You work with what you got, man.
Next up, we've got a great match. Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. As Shawn makes his entrance, he shoots confetti into the crowd out of guns that were placed in the aisle, and about half of them don't seem like they work. Whose idea was this? This is like Johnny B. Bad from 10 years prior.
Jason Robinson, who was the lighting director, would oftentimes come up with little entrance stunts for the guys, be it lighting or pyro and some different things. And he would work with the pyro guys hand in hand to come in with something. It's like if you remember during the Trish entrance, when she walked down the aisle, they had the confetti guns going off there. And so this was just something for Shawn to shoot off. Yeah. Some of them were duds. It was kind of like the time when they tried to shoot off the T-shirt cannon and just nothing worked, but trying to do something different.
It's a really fun match. Lots of high spots in here. It's probably one of the more underrated matches of Shawn's WrestleMania career. And one of Chris Jericho's absolute great matches at WrestleMania. You should go out of your way to see this if you haven't in a while. You'll notice some things that look different. Shawn's haircut, having the little Dutch boy haircut, looks a little different. But the actual match itself, I remember mostly for a couple of spots. The back suplex at the corner that Shawn reversed in midair to sort of crash on top of Jericho. Of course, the iconic Jericho Bulldog and then Lion Salt that were executed perfectly. Shawn dropping the elbow off the top, very slow, very dramatic, very cool. And then all the teases for the Sweet Chin Music finish that never really come. And then out of nowhere, a pinning combination from Shawn Michaels for the 1-2-3. And you feel like you're getting your feel good moment after where, hey, maybe I couldn't beat you, but I respect you. And the handshake comes and the hug comes, but then Jericho kicks him in the nuts. Good stuff. I enjoyed this match. What'd you think?
Loved it. And it kept, Jericho goes out, gets pinned in the middle of the ring, fair and square, clean as a whistle, and walked out of there with more heat than he walked in. That's the beauty of a match. Shawn, superb, but the story that they told in that match was excellent. And when a guy comes out stronger than he was going in off of one little move, obviously the whole match told a great story, but that one kick in the nuts after all's said and done.
That's what everybody remembers.
You think you're going to have that moment? It made him.
Jericho had a lot to say about this match in his book. He wrote, "Our first meeting was almost a throwaway segment. I would confront him about being a relic from the past and he would super kick me and that would be the end of it. But there was a certain electricity when Shawn and I stood nose to nose in the ring and everyone from the fans to the boys to Vince himself could feel it. When Shawn and I walked back through the curtain, Vince approached us and said, 'We've got money here.' I agreed. And since it was December, I immediately began thinking WrestleMania. And when I approached Shawn about it, he was hesitant. 'I don't know if I'll be around that long,' he said, but I really think he meant it. He was a little gun shy about returning to the ring full time as he'd been out for 5 years with a back injury. But the more he thought about it and the more we talked, he decided he was ready to return at WrestleMania and he wanted the return to be against me. I was gobsmacked by his decision. When I first started wrestling, I was essentially a Shawn Michaels clone. I had similar tights, similar canary yellow hair. I had the same hot spots as him, but things had changed. I wasn't a clone anymore. It was pro versus pro, and I was looking forward to see if I could live up to the standards of a Shawn Michaels big event. And this is Shawn's first match back here at WrestleMania, Bruce. And he sort of says that, you know, before and now, I mean, he's a different person, and he says he's a new person. And this sort of feels like a new event, because before his work was his life, and now his work is just his work. His family is his life. How different was he to deal with here at this WrestleMania, say from WrestleMania 14 when we saw him last?
Completely different person. And it was a completely different human being. He was guarded in a lot of respects because of his past reputation. And so he was, you know, walking on eggshells a little bit because he knew and he recognized and brought up, yeah, I used to be a dick, and I was a different person then. And he was trying to make a conscious effort to not be a dick and to say, hey, no, I've changed and I'm a different person now. So there was that. And when we went into this, that's like I said before, there were no plans to have this match at WrestleMania. And as they went on and the chemistry was there, they were clicking and they were having great matches. They enjoyed working with each other. Man, we had a WrestleMania match on our hands, and probably one of the best matches both of them had in a WrestleMania. And for a WrestleMania moment, that was a beautiful thing.
Jericho says they really patterned the angle after a classic kung fu movie plot where the student feels he's better than the teacher. And he says really the story sort of wrote itself, but he came up with most of the 27-minute match when he was shopping at Dick's Sporting Goods for Speedo undertights that week. And they sort of laid it out to where they felt like they could have the crowd on the edge of the seats the whole time for 27 minutes. So there's lots of false finishes here. And of course, the story after where we see that Jericho really is just a dick. He wrote in his book, the general consensus that our match stole the show was a huge compliment. Only 18 other matches in the history of the business could make that claim. And to do so was the goal of every single performer who'd ever been on a WrestleMania. Personally, winning the Undisputed Championship was an amazing moment, but stealing the show at WrestleMania 19 topped it. In a lot of ways, it was the greatest night of my career. I thank Shawn for that, and I also take pride in the fact that he thanks me for the match as well. After WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels was back, and I had helped him get there. When we talked backstage afterwards, we were told that our match had gone too long. Shawn wiped the sweat off his face and said with a smirk, when you have a match as good as that, you can go as long as you want. Yep. HBK was definitely back. Do you remember it going too long there? I mean, that feels like something you would have been telling him.
Well, no, because I was doing so many other things at this WrestleMania, and it was just so damn involved with Vince and Piper and Hogan and all that stuff. I was everywhere else. I don't even think I watched this match live. So I watched it after the fact, and obviously just watched it now. But it was without a doubt one of the greatest, it'll go down as one of the greatest WrestleMania matches ever. So both guys did everything that they were asked to do. And sometimes, it goes long. If it affects the show and affects other thing, that's not a good thing. I don't care how good the match is. You have your time, you need to hit it. But sometimes if you steal the show, it's forgiven.
So let me ask, Bruce, if you weren't in Gorilla and you weren't really like timing the show or giving cues like that, what were you doing here? Were you in the back with chauffeur's cap on, covering up your nappy hair, carrying Hunter's bags, or what were you doing?
I just told you what I was doing.
You said running around.
I was running around working with Vince and Hogan and Piper and getting all that stuff for their match and going over everything we were doing there and working with Kurt and Brock on their stuff as well. But I had other
but I guess
I didn't deal with the Raw stuff at that time.
Chat me up about where those type of meetings happen. I guess I'm looking for
dude, I'm all over the place. I'm in dressing rooms. We're in Vince's office. We're in the dressing room. We're in hallways. We're in showers. It's all over the place.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to ask, and I'm not trying to beat you up, I'm trying to make sure I understand. When you're talking to Hogan, Vince, and Piper, are they in 3 different locations, or can you get everybody together and y'all just talk through the shit?
Sometimes they are in different places, and we'll go, we'll all be together, go over everything for the match, and then separate. And Vince will go, God damn, I've got this. Let Terry know. And then Hogan's like, okay, we'll do this. And it's all over the place. You're doing wearing a lot of different hats, trying to make sure that the whole show is coming together, and you're not able to sit down, especially at this pay-per-view in a stadium where it had to be all over the place. And I had to be with Roddy. A lot of people didn't, other than myself, Vince, Hogan, maybe 1 or 2 other people, no one else knew what the hell Piper was doing there. They thought he was just there as an old timer signing autographs and making an appearance.
Well, maybe it was time that Piper, shifted his career into gear. And if you're looking to do that, you should call 833 Best Way, right?
Yeah. You give Bret the Hitman Hartman a call, and it's all about quality of life. And with 833 Best Way, you can make your own schedule. And if you want to work and get every weekend off, you can do that. If you want to go out for a little bit longer trips and make some premium dollars, you can do that too, and have the quality of life that you deserve. A lot of our listeners are truck drivers, and they listen to our show. Well, if you're looking for a better way, Best Way is the best way. Call 833 Best Way. Bret the Hitman Hartman is going to pick up the phone and talk to you and tell you how you can start your new career today.
Next up, we see referee Sylvain go into Vince's locker room. Of course, he's going to be the ref that we see in a little bit. He was also the ref of the Rock Hogan match at No Way Out 03. Then Tony Chimmel announces the new Safeco Field attendance record of 54,097. What would Meltzer say about the attendance here, Bruce?
He'd probably say it was really only 9,000 people.
Next up, Limp Bizkit performs the WrestleMania theme. What is it again, Bruce?
Crack Addict. I love it.
And then the coach brings out Tanya Bollinger and Katana Baker, better known as the Miller Lite Catfight Girls, for a pillow fight. This brings out Stacy Keibler and then Torrie Wilson, who want to jump into the action. The tops come off, the bottoms stay on, but asses are spanked. And then our man, the coach, gets de-pantsed. Probably not exactly who we wanted to see lose their pants here.
I want to see chocolate ass. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry.
What did you think of this segment?
I was glad it was over.
It's so disappointing too, because when they come out and they get in a bed, you're like, what the fuck is this? Like the male part of me is like, hey man, roll tide. About to see a little drop top titty tipping time. And then you're like, man, if I brought my daughter to this show, this would be like, nah, I'm out on this. And then coach loses his pants. It's womp, womp.
So then it's okay.
What?
For your daughter, the coach loses his pants.
Well, she's not going to see anything on coach, right?
Well,
next up, we got Triple H taking on Booker T. I know you're excited to talk about this one. Triple H is out here in his lavender pants, and he doesn't have a ridiculous entrance. He just comes to the ring, and he comes first. Booker T actually comes out second. We see Booker hit the Harlem Hangover, but Booker's slow to cover, and Flair puts Triple H's foot on the rope to break the count. And then Booker tries to hit the ropes for the scissor kick, but he can't put weight on the leg and collapses. So Triple H hits the pedigree and both men are down. Triple H just lays there and eventually crawls over and gets the pin. It's 18 minutes and 47 seconds when the bell sounds. But what everybody's talked about for years and years and years is that Booker T didn't win after bringing up his criminal past and chauffeur cap and here's $1, get me a towel and get my bags and nappy hair and dance for me. And the fact that he lost to the pedigree, but most of all that it took Hunter 24 seconds to pin him. So usually when there's a finishing maneuver, maybe there's a couple of seconds when you're trying to see, can he pin him? But this goes on for like 21 seconds before he ever puts his arm over him. And a lot of people feel like this just buried Booker T. I know you don't believe that. Get that chapstick ready, Bruce.
Fuck you and your chapstick shit. It's people that don't understand the business. If you're going to lose, you want to lose to somebody's finish. If that's Wrestling 101. And I thought the match was great. I thought the finish was good, and it told a damn good story. So people that don't like it, there's no explanation that they're going to accept anyway. So fuck it. I'm not going to give you one other than it was the right call. It was a damn good match, and it was what it was. And you're going to make a mountain out of a molehill over whatever. Oh, it was, would it have been okay if it was 21 seconds? Would have been, I mean, that's silliness now. That's just somebody overanalyzing and trying to pick a fight and pick shit out that's just not there. It's like, why did they put this match on first? And why was this on Heat? Well, it's because this guy said something to this guy's. There's not that much thought put into that kind of shit. It's, you have to do a job. You have to do a lineup. You have to do a match. What's the best finish? And the best finish was pedigree 1, 2, 3. So that's it.
Let me ask this, because there's an expression in the wrestling business that a lot of people have heard. The only thing that's real is the money and the miles. Would this have been Booker T's biggest one match payoff of his career?
I have no idea. Probably was a good one, but I'm sure it was a good one for him. Yeah.
Next up, we get a street fight. Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. If you watch nothing from this show after we've talked about it, you need to watch this. This is the match that seemed to be promoted as the main event of the show, and Hogan's career is on the line in this match. And of course, Hogan's out first, and then Vince McMahon. And to my surprise, this is a more than passable match. I'm not going to say it's like a 5-star clinic, but I am going to say that these guys worked their ass off, and they proved that in order to get a lot of heat and to get the fans behind you and to tell a story, you don't have to use 100 moves. But there is crazy shit going down in here. They're hitting each other with chairs. Everyone's bleeding. Vince McMahon's bleeding. They're setting up table spots. Vince McMahon climbs a fucking ladder and puts Hulk Hogan through a table. You hear me? Vince McMahon put Hulk Hogan through a table when he jumped off a goddamn ladder. But maybe
with a leg drop.
Cause you know, that's heat, roll tide. But maybe the most iconic scene from this entire match, and you know what I'm going to bring up. You and I talked about off air because I asked, how long did you guys practice or set up, or ahead of time did you decide you wanted that Vince McMahon peeking over the apron with that devilish grin as his face is just covered in blood when he pulls the pipe out from under the ring? So he sees Hogan laying prone in the ring. He's looking for a weapon to sort of finish him off. He finds a pipe, and when he peeks up, the camera catches every bit of it. It's like out of a Hollywood movie. And to my surprise, you said,
good camera work.
It wasn't planned.
No.
So it was just, the guys knew, you know, hey, Vince is over there. Let's shoot and see what happens when he comes up. And Vince just happened to do it, and it happened to be caught on camera, and it feels super set up. But you say, nay, that was organic, and it just happened.
100% organic. That's Kerwin Silfies, great directing. Stu or Marty or whoever the hell it was that got the shot, and, you know, Switcher in the truck, seen it, whoever pointed it out, say, hey, watch Vince over here, get that camera there. And sometimes, man, you get lightning in a bottle, and that's what they did.
Now, you told us the story on the Roddy Piper episode, but we'll tell it again here briefly. Piper was not always part of the plan for this match, and you guys reached out just right before WrestleMania to sort of make the deal for him to appear here, right?
I called him the Friday night before, and what are you doing? I'm just sitting here, and pitched the idea to him. It was something that Vince and I had talked about, where we wanted to do. He felt the match with Hogan needed something, and was looking for something from the outside to make it that big pop, that big moment. Being in Seattle, knowing that Piper lived in Portland, but also just when you look back at the 80s, who were those icons? It was Hulk and Roddy. I pitched Piper, and Piper was not a popular name. Not, one of Vince's first picks. But people in the office, Roddy could be somewhat difficult to work with at times. And I knew that anybody else would have poo-pooed it, but Vince listened and was like, call him and see if he's interested. And we did. He drove down, snuck him into the hotel, got him into the building. And like I said, people thought that he was there to do an appearance, like he was going to be up in one of the boxes as one of the legends to sign autographs and hang out with people at the event. But, I walked him out, put him in a trench coat, walked him out into the crowd, big hat on his head, and we stood and watched the match underneath the one of the sound trusses and sound areas there. And when it was time, I walked him to the ring, moved the security guard out of the way, and got him in the ring. I don't think at that point, I don't even think Jim Ross knew he was a part of the match. Jim knew he was there, but was like, what's he there? I said, talk to Vince, and Vince was just like, don't bother me now, JR. I got a match to do. But I don't even think at that point JR knew that he was involved in the match.
So Piper comes into the ring. He's wearing a trench coat and a hat, takes the hat off, then the trench coat. The crowd pops. They know the story. This is back to WrestleMania 1. And Roddy picks up the pipe and he acts like he's going to hit Vince, but instead turns and hits Hogan. Then he blows his nose on Hogan and gets out of there. Vince crawls to Hogan, covers him. Hogan kicks out. Vince goes for the pipe, but referee Brian Hebner tries to stop him. So angry Vince throws Hebner out. He grabs the pipe again and motions for his referee Sylvan to come down. Eventually referee Mike Sparks gets into it with Sylvan on the floor, and Vince hits Hogan with the pipe and drops a leg on him, but only gets a 2 count, and you know what's coming. Hogan hulks up, delivers the 3 punches to Sylvan, and then tosses him to the floor. Vince tries to hit him with a double axe handle, but it's too much for Hulk. He's hulking up, man. 3 punches, the boot, and then 3 leg drops gets him the pin. Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon, with a handful of moves, go nearly 21 minutes here in a damn entertaining match. And Shane comes down from the back to check on Vince, and Hulk poses, and there's no confrontation. But it told a great story. And the story here is it only took 1 leg drop to beat Andre the Giant, but it took 3 to beat Vince McMahon.
Is that what the story was?
I'm just busting balls. I really enjoyed this match, man. This is a great, old school wrestling, is it not?
It was, it was classic. And like I said, it wasn't pretty,
Right.
but it told a great story, and they busted their asses. There were some of those shots, man. You look at some of those punches that Vince is throwing and hitting Hulk in the face and watching Hulk's reaction, like, Jesus. It was a great story, man, all the way around. And it was something that it was nice to get there. It was just so nice to get there. And then I wanted, which we'll talk about later on at some point, but I wanted to get there with the hair match later on with the whole Mr. America thing later on, but it didn't happen. And that was just one of my, that was a proud, happy moment for me, because when you have something big like that and have it come off and they have the surprise of Roddy Piper in there, it was just some cool shit. It was some really cool shit.
How is this WrestleMania different from others when Vince, who's normally sort of the puppeteer, is actually participating in a match? His day has to look a lot different, right?
It does. And for those of us, trying to run things, it becomes less stressful because he's worried about his match and you don't have him breathing down your neck, and more stressful because he's worried about everything. So it's, you get both sides of it, and I don't know which one is better, but for me on this day, I was running all over the place, and I had one of those little carts too, with a driver that would drive me everywhere, because it was just such a damn big building, and I'm fat and I'm lazy. But no, just running all over the place. It was it was crazy. And he's sitting there, he's trying to get his match, but he's watching the show. And of course he has to nitpick every little thing. So it gets crazy, but at the same time, it's a little less stressful because you don't have him yelling and screaming at you.
Let's talk about Vince. You know, he's in tremendous shape here. And one of the promos, it's kind of fun. He says, you know, for 20 years, I've often wondered, you know, who would win in a fight, me or Hulk Hogan? He told us a few years ago or a few episodes ago at a trade show, it was actually kicked around and discussed. What if he made a spectacle of himself at one of those NAPTI deals and he attacked Hulk Hogan? When this is a marquee match and one of the featured matches, or the money matches, as you called it earlier, how serious does Vince McMahon take the training? We can look at him and see that physically he's taking that serious, but from a wrestling standpoint, how serious is he training? Who with? How often? Where? Talk us through that.
Vince is in the ring every day. And during this time, you know, he's in the gym, he's in the ring, he's training with my brother Tom in the studio. And he takes it very seriously because he doesn't want to be embarrassed, and he wants to go out and put out the very best show that he possibly can, and wants to show everybody that, hey, I can do this. So he's putting everything into it that he possibly can, up all night long, whether it's training in the ring or training in the gym. He's going to show everybody, you know, if I can do it at my age, you can do it at your age.
You think this is Vince McMahon's best match ever?
You know, that it's a toss up between,
can I guess,
some of the stuff he did with Steve.
I was going to guess you were going to say St. Valentine's Day Massacre in this.
Thank you. Yes. The blue cage, the big blue cage.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that those two are probably, you know, the best Vince matches, defining big match moments for Vince.
Let's talk about the next match, which a lot of people probably have as the real main event. Steve Austin and The Rock. It's the third and final match. And unfortunately it's Austin's last match ever. And, you know, I think sometimes if you grew up the same era as I did, you sort of take Austin's career for granted sometimes because it was so short and it's not what we necessarily grew up on. Like, I grew up a Hogan guy, but nobody was cooler in this era than Stone Cold Steve Austin. And he was everybody's favorite, but he wasn't on top just a ton of time. You know, he became the guy 4 WrestleManias or 5 WrestleManias prior to this, but he missed a whole year because of surgery and then walked out for several months as well. So all told, it's not the longest run on top, but nobody had highs as high as he did. And it hits you in the feels to watch this match, man, knowing this is it. And his, stomping to the ring that night, his entrance and the way it was shot from behind instead of the front was maybe one of the most iconic shots in the history of the company. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. You know, and I cried at the end of the match, you know, knowing what I know now and just, you know, watching it's emotional. You know, seeing Rock, you know, telling him he loves him at the end and having that little moment there in the middle of the ring. You know, those are things as a performer, and those are things being in the business and being as close, you know, as you become to these guys, that those are the special moments that you just can't recreate. And that people, unless you're there, it's difficult to relate to sometimes. And as a fan, you can relate to it as a fan and have those feelings. But when you work as closely as we did with people, and for me, I don't know that I really knew it was Steve's last match at that point. You know, watching it now and knowing that, it's doubly hard. But you had the feeling, but you didn't know. And it's just, you know, it's a friend. And it's someone that you care for and someone you respect. And for them not to be able to go out on their terms sometimes and have to go out because of an injury and just things like that you can't control. It's hard. It's just hard.
on the Mania of WrestleMania documentary, which is not on the network, by the way. So WWE, if you're listening, put that on the network. We'd really like to make it available for our listeners. It is on the internet. So if you Google Mania of WrestleMania, it will be there, but not on WWE network. Come on, WWE, help us out. Ventura, Jesse Ventura does the voiceovers for that. And they cover a lot of the Steve Austin story here. And I want to sort of paraphrase some of it. They interview McMahon on that documentary, and he says, Rock, as popular as he is, was never quite Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I thought that was a really telling quote from Vince, because obviously The Rock has gone on to be the biggest star in the history of the business. But as far as from a WWE fan standpoint, Austin was still another level. Would you agree with that?
I would. And Steve did it longer.
Austin is also coming back after a big layoff here where he walked out on the company last year. And Ventura said when he came back to some resentment in the locker room. And they show him, as they're saying that, shaking hands and trying to make amends, or so they're explaining, to guys like Kurt Angle. We've talked a little bit about this on our Austin Walks Out episode in the archives over at youtube.com/something to wrestle. But the reason this is sort of weird to watch back in hindsight now is I remember watching this in 2003 and I knew it was a trilogy match, but I knew that Austin had already bested the trilogy. So it's not like this is a rubber match necessarily. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I sort of armchair quarterbacked at the time and wished for different matches, feeling I'd already seen this one twice. I might have felt differently knowing what I know now, because when I watched it this time, I approached it totally different. Stone Cold is quoted in that movie we're talking about, The Mania of WrestleMania, as saying, I didn't want anyone to know about my health problems because I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin. He felt like he was bulletproof, which is what his vest said on his back that day. But he, the person, Steve Williams, was not. He, the person, Steve Williams, quote, I didn't have any business being in the ring. And Ventura says exactly what Bruce just reiterated. No one really knew it was going to be his last match. And Steve said in that documentary, because really, who cares? You're just a gear in the machine, and I was a gear that got used up. So they just put a new gear in, and the machine keeps rolling. And he was saying he was rolling the dice, even being in the ring that night. But he didn't want to stink the joint out. That was his primary concern. And he's doing this interview for this documentary the night before WrestleMania. And he's saying, I don't want to stink the joint out. That's my primary concern for tomorrow. But of course, right after that interview, he goes to his hotel room, panicked, and called JR thinking he was having a heart attack. So they go to the hospital. And that's what we hear about this whole incident from the documentary. But let's go ahead and put a bow on the match. It takes 3 rock bottoms to get Austin out. And Austin says that at that moment, he just really wanted the match to end. He was physically spent. He was done. And after the match, rather than The Rock getting her up and running around and celebrating, he rearranges himself so he can sit and look straight down at Austin, pushes the referee away, and says, I just want to thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. I appreciate you and I love you. And when asked on the documentary, hey, what'd you say to Austin in the ring after? The Rock says, I'm not telling you. But Austin shared it in the documentary, and he told you what I just said. And he says that he said it back. I love you too. And that's sort of an interesting finish to their rivalry, because those guys did not start off as friends and had a huge competitive rivalry. But it is sort of fitting that if Austin really understands the business like we know he does, and he knows that this is the next top guy and this is the guy who deserves my spot, then if I'm the worn out gear, he needs to replace me, and he's happy to do so. That's a relationship that a lot of people who aren't in the business, like myself, probably don't really get, right, Bruce?
Yeah, exactly. And when you give your body, when you're in the ring with somebody, you're giving them your body, and you have to trust them. And watching this match, you go back and watch it, it's a cliche. By God, he left everything in that ring. That night, those guys left everything in that ring. You felt it, you saw it. It was real. It was captivating. And again, in hindsight, when you watch it, you go, Jesus Christ. This is unbelievable.
It really is.
You know, we didn't know that was Steve's last match. You know, I got the call late Saturday night from Vince, just giving me a heads up. The Raw team knew until the next day that anything had even happened the night before. A lot of people chalked it up to Steve, you know, drinking all the Red Bulls and coffee and just going 9 million miles an hour. And he had his own health in his head, you know, and was going through a lot of issues that probably complicated it even more when he went into the hospital. But, you know, I think the only people that knew he was in the hospital were Vince and JR. That night, you know, Vince just gave me a heads up and said, you know, be thinking in the back of your head. I think we'll be okay, but keep it in the back of your head. Was like, is he okay? Yeah, he'll be fine. So it's when you hear all about it after the fact, you're like, damn. And that son of a bitch went to the ring.
Let's talk about it. Austin wrote in his book, damn, I think I'm going to die. I'm dying for sure. I'm getting off the elevator on the 27th floor of the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Seattle the night before WrestleMania 19. And my heart is beating so hard, it feels like it's going to crack a rib to jump out of my chest. And I'm saying to myself, I'm 38 years old and I'm fixing to freaking die right here, right now. I'm having a damned heart attack and I'm wondering how the hell it could have happened. I've been working out twice a day at the gym and doing nothing but focusing on the match. Mentally, I'm ready, despite all the challenges I've been through in the past couple of years. Injuries, surgery, rehab, divorces, and most unexpected of all, leaving the WWE. Physically, I look like someone who deserves the name Stone Cold, but truthfully, I'm a walking disaster. My back, neck, and knees are a mess. I've got 2 fused discs in my back and others just barely holding together. But tomorrow's WrestleMania, and I need to perform the best I can and put on a hell of a match. Hell, it could very well be the last one of my career, but I want to go out in a blaze of glory like anybody would. So standing here on the 27th floor of the Grand Hyatt, my heart pounding against my ribs like a gorilla trying to bust out of its cage, that wasn't in the plans at all. I'd woken up that morning feeling all right. But the more I thought about it, the problem went back to before that morning. The day before, which was Friday, I'd bought a couple of those high energy drinks from the gym, and I was in the habit of drinking 3 to 5 of those things a day, plus 1 to 2 cups of coffee or pots of coffee while I was off and working out. Those drinks are loaded with ephedra and crap, lots of caffeine. I should have known with all the warnings about ephedra, but it never bothered me until now. Famous last words. I worked out at a gym on Friday and then went back to the hotel, and I was a little emotional because I figured this was probably the last match of my career. So I didn't sleep well at all. When I woke up, it was one of those mornings where you need a crane to pull yourself out of bed. So I opened up one of those energy drinks and drank that thing down. This is before I had coffee, breakfast, whatever. Then I ordered room service and drank another energy drink. When my breakfast came, it was the normal egg white omelet and a large pot of coffee. I drank the whole pot. Then I called Kevin Nash to check with him before going to the gym. And we had a couple of cups of coffee together. When we went to the gym, I noticed that over the last couple of days, the reflexes in my leg were really jumpy. I have what's called a sustained clonus reflex in both legs. That is an involuntary shaking of the nerves, knees, whatever. I was nervous about the whole weekend. It's probably being my last match, about hurting my back. All that crap I'd been putting in my body and doing this stuff for months on end. Looking back, I was just wearing myself down. I went to the gym, but I didn't really work out. I didn't feel like doing a whole lot. So I did sort of a BS workout, a really light back workout. I did recumbent bike for my knee, just pedaling on it, not really trying to raise my cardio or anything. And Kevin had come over after he finished his cardio, and we're just sitting talking together. I said to him, look, pointing down to my foot, it was just resting on the bike pedal, and the reflexes were just firing like crazy in my foot and leg. I said, look at that crap. He looked at my foot as it jumped uncontrollably on the bike pedal and said out loud, Jesus Christ. I went through the lobby, got in an elevator, and rode it up to my floor. And as soon as I got out of that damn elevator, that's when everything started happening. My heartbeat might be doing 160 or 180 beats per minute. And then when Steve got to the room, he called the front desk to see if they had a doctor. He needed somebody up there. He needed help. They put him on hold. So then he hung up and he called and said it was an emergency. And in the meantime, Liz was with one of the WWE executives, just happened to be walking down the hall. And he had the door wide open, waiting for some help. And he saw her and started yelling. He was as white as a sheet. His legs were shaking. He couldn't make them stop. And she rushed in. And then Bob and Chris from the WWE came into the room. And then the Dr. Robert came in, and they wound up taking his heart rate and got him into an ambulance and out of there. Once they get to the ambulance, they hook him up to all these machines to monitor his heart rate and blood pressure and get an IV going. They put 5 bags of fluid in there. The average person might get 2 if they're dehydrated, but he gets 5. And JR and Vince McMahon are coming to the hospital, and they arrive while he's still in the ER. And, it's a weird deal. They wind up keeping him overnight for evaluation. And it feels like the worst possible ending for a wrestler. I mean, you'd like to go out on a high point at WrestleMania, but you sure as shit don't want to spend the night before in the hospital. Nobody even knew any of this happened outside of a really closed circle of WWE executives who kept a hush hush. And nobody really knew this was the end, except maybe Austin and JR. Would you agree with that?
You know, I would, but I don't even know if JR knew. I think Steve, may have known in his head, but I don't know if he even shared that with JR.
When did McMahon know
that it was his last match?
Yeah.
Probably after.
I know that Steve is sort of a weird cat, and his attitude is, who cares? But realistically, the biggest star in the history of the company, don't you wish as a fan that there would have been a bigger retirement send-off possible for him?
Well, absolutely. And I wish as a human being that you wouldn't have had to have the send off. And I wish that, it could have been a whole lot different, that he didn't have to go through all of that stuff. Unfortunately, we don't always get to pick, what happens to us and when it happens to us. I didn't like having my heart attacks when I had them, we don't get to choose those things. And this was unfortunate, and you deal with it as it's served up to you. So, you do the best with what you have.
It's an interesting to think about. We talk about this all the time because I'm a little obsessed with time, and, Stone Cold's done here at 38. I want to remind everybody, Nakamura's 38. AJ Styles is 40. So we're talking about a guy where we're saying, his body's broken down on him. He's got to retire. Imagine if that was Nakamura today, you'd be like, oh man, it was cut too short. Or AJ 2 years ago. But it happened to Steve at 38, man. It's a sad deal because you just assume at 38, oh shit, man, he's just getting started. He's got another 5, 6, 7, 8 years left, but it didn't happen.
Nope. Unfortunately, he's human.
Well, the next 2 guys at times didn't look human. Let's get to Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, the main event for the world title, SmackDown world title. Kurt Angle's coming in as the champ, and he's probably here against all good common sense, but he's going to do his best. For at least 7 years, he's been dealing with this neck injury that had him in excruciating pain. The only way to get through it is to have painkillers. He's become reliant on them, and he's going to have surgery right after this. And instead of electing to have the traditional fusion surgery where he's out for a year, he's going to go with some new experimental surgery that may have him back in just 2 months. And we've covered all that on our Kurt Angle episode, which you can hear in long form, youtube.com/something to wrestle. This is one hell of a match, and Brock Lesnar is the guy who's going to come away with the nod. And it's a phenomenal match. Two of the greatest amateur wrestlers of all time. One's a gold fucking medalist, and one is an athlete like we've never seen in professional wrestling before. But unfortunately, nobody talks about the match. They all talk about the botched shooting star press, and we're going to talk about it too. But first, I'd like to just take a minute to reflect on how amazing it is that Brock Lesnar's even here. Brock's been in the company on the main roster for less than a year. This is his very first WrestleMania. And in his first WrestleMania, before he's been with the company a year, he's in the main event winning the world title at WrestleMania. That in and of itself seems ridiculous. But let's also remind you, this is at a time when the company has Rey Mysterio and Rob Van Dam and Big Show and Undertaker and Chris Jericho and The Rock and Steve Austin and Triple H and on and on and on. Shawn Michaels. I mean, you've got every star who's ever been a star in the company from Hulk Hogan on down. And in his very first WrestleMania, he's in the main event winning the world title. That's a hell of a fucking endorsement from Vince McMahon, is it not?
He was the next big thing.
He was the big thing at this point. He wasn't the next big thing. Yeah. It's,
never before had a moniker fit someone as well as Brock Lesnar. And he was the big thing. He was, he had it. He was special.
Let's talk about the finish. Obviously people expect a Matt Classic here. Kurt's hurt. It's probably not as good as what it could have been, but it's still a phenomenal match. But nobody talks about the match. They all talk about the finish. And there's footage of Brock Lesnar landing flawlessly this shooting star press when he was in OVW. When did you first hear that he was going to attempt a shooting star press? Or when did you first hear that you knew he could do one? That you had heard about it from OVW or what have you?
I had seen it in OVW. I'd seen him do it, so I knew he could do it. The big question was why? A big bastard doesn't need to be doing a shooting star press ever. You don't expect it. There's no reason to do it. He's an amateur beast. He's a professional beast. Why would he climb up to the top rope and do that? Just logically and trying to think psychology wise, I never saw any reason for him to do it. So there were people that were enamored with all that kind of stuff that, oh my God, a big guy doing something like that shows his athleticism and everything else. I was kind of the mindset that he didn't need to do it. And he sure as hell didn't need to do it for the first time at a big stage like WrestleMania. Having never done it in that ring that I know of, not in our ring. So, I'd heard rumblings about it, and I don't know. You're going to ask me, who suggested it? I don't know. And there's, the rumor and innuendo that Brock had said someone had suggested it to him. He shouldn't have listened to him. I don't know who that was. I don't know who suggested it. I know I was asked during the day about it, and I said, you don't need it. He beat him with his finish. And Kurt was fine with him beating him with his finish. So I don't know, who it was that suggested he do the shooting star press, but, he did it. And for all how do you know it wasn't planned for him to botch it and just do it head first into the apron like that?
Well, I hope nobody intended on jumping head first.
Yeah. God. I always tell guys, I said, it's live. We meant for that to happen. No one would ever mean for that to happen. It was ugly. It was brutal. That one I watched at Gorilla and I was terrified.
If you had to put your finger on who you think may have been the guy who suggested it, dude,
I've heard Michael, I've heard Paul Heyman, I've heard Angle suggested it. I don't know. I really don't know. I never, doing the research for this show was really the first time I'd heard that quote from Brock. And I'm thinking about it, thinking, who would it have been? I know Heyman always liked that. I know Michael likes big moves. I know Kurt's crazy. So I don't know. And I don't want to say it could have been anybody, it could have been Fit Finlay. Hey, how about you do this? So the end of the day, he decided he was going to do it, and he did it. So it didn't work out, but it's the move and the match itself overall. Before that was an absolutely brutal, flawless, great story all the way through that match. And Brock could have ended it with that F5 and gone home.
The shooting star was supposed to be the finish, but obviously it doesn't hit, and everybody is sort of shocked. You can hear the referee or Kurt or both of them when he misses it, and Kurt gives him an angle slam and then goes to pin him. You can hear him say, or those guys say, "Kick out." And sure enough, Brock does. And supposedly as that's happening, Kurt's trying to talk to him, say, "Talk to me, talk to me, talk to me." And eventually Brock says, yeah. And Kurt calls the audible, and they say, "Hey, just hit me with an F5 and let's go home." So an F5 brings it to a close. 21 minutes and 8 seconds gives Brock his second world title. Of course, Lesnar remembers none of this. And afterwards, Angle says when he finally got a chance to look eye to eye with Lesnar, he could see that nobody was home.
Nobody was home.
Brock had a long distance stare where he was looking well past him. And Kurt says something like, "Hey man, go hit all posts to, celebrate in the turnbuckles with your world title." And it's a weird situation because you're worried about the guy and you don't know what we know now about CTE, but clearly he had a concussion, and Kurt's in bad shape and he doesn't feel good physically, and he's not really happy with the end of that match, I'm sure. And there's tremendous footage on this Mania After WrestleMania documentary that you should go find, where Brock really doesn't want anything to do with anybody backstage. Everybody's trying to tend to him, and he's just having nothing to do with it. Briscoe's trying to hold him down and console him and just wrangle him in. But Briscoe was the one that I said, go get him before he kills everybody. Everybody was all over him, and they were trying to get him on a stretcher and take him to the hospital. Brock blew up. Now there was one little blow up right before that, on the way to the stretcher that they don't show in there. And that's where, he threw me halfway across the hall. Because I was on him trying to tell him, hey man, let's get you looked at and let's make sure you're okay first. And he just did the roar, and I went flying. So when they finally got him to sit down and everybody started doing it, he did it again. I was like, Jerry, you're the only one at this point that he's really going to listen to. So that's why Briscoe got in there and was like, hey, big boy, calm down. It's me. I'm the only one that's going to touch you. We can go to the dressing room, but you got to let these guys look at you. And Brock was pissed off. There was a camera there. He was hurt. It's like a wounded animal. You corner a wounded animal, they're going to lash out. And we just wanted to get him down and get a doctor to look at him and make sure that he was okay. 'Cause obviously he wasn't. And, it was scary as shit. And everybody's tending to Brock. In the meantime, in another dressing room, all by himself, Kurt is coming down, man, off of the match. His body's starting to, cool down and calm down. And so we get Brock in the dressing room. He's got a million people around him. And I'm like, where's Kurt?
Oh, Kurt's dressing in this other dressing room down here. So I walk down to see Kurt. I walk in, and Kurt is standing in the shower. The shower's going. He's naked, just holding on to the shower in the middle of the room. It was like a group shower, locker room type thing, and he's holding on to the shower. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And nobody's home at all. So I'm like, "Kurt, are you okay?" And he looks at me with a completely blank stare. Had no idea. So I go in the shower. I take Kurt, get him a towel, take him out. And I'm like trying to talk to him. And his wife, Karen, was right outside the door. And I said, "Hey, I don't want to alarm you. You need to come in here." And he was just shaking like he was freezing. And in the meantime, I'm trying to get somebody to go get me a trainer, go get me a doctor, get somebody in here. And Kurt was starting to break down, as the adrenaline had worn off. He's starting to cool down, man. He's starting to feel everything in his body. And that's another one, cliche. He left everything out in that ring that night. I mean, everything. So now we got, the two guys in our main event are two toughest badass studs in the entire company. And they're a shell of themselves, just, they've beaten the hell out of each other, two warriors colliding, and both of them are a wreck at this point. So we get the doctor in. The doctor looks at Kurt, and we finally get him to where he stopped shaking, stood in there, helped him take a shower and everything, and the doctor stood in there with him. He came out, he dried off, he cooled down. And he's like, "No, I'll be fine. I'm okay. It just was coming down. I got cold, and I'll be okay." I'm like, "Dude, you gotta, no, we gotta take you in." Both guys refused to go to the hospital. Just flat out refused. Would not go. Would not do it. It was scary. I mean, it was really a scary, scary time. Brock had his entire family there, and they're all concerned. But it was quite the aftermath, to say the least.
Naked and shaking so violently, couldn't control it is the condition of Kurt Angle after his body had just completely shut down on him. Karen Angle is in this documentary Mania After WrestleMania, and doesn't even like the same person that we've probably seen on TNA in the last few years. But it's weird to go back and think about this moment in time where Kurt Angle was like, "I'd rather die in the ring than not go out there and do it that night." And then you've got on the other side, a guy who should easily be on a gurney with a neck brace, and he's just having nothing to do with it, man.
Well, and then it gets even scarier because, I don't know, scarier, but just more drama and more craziness. We're at this hotel, the Hyatt downtown. And of course, after WrestleMania, you have the WrestleMania party. Well, I'm kind of in charge of SmackDown at this time, and my two top guys are hurt. Now, I'm in the middle of the floor. On one side of me is Dusty Rhodes. On the other side is Brock. In the rooms, there are three rooms on the floor, kind of lined up, and I'm in the middle. I got Brock on one side, Dusty on the other. Kurt is on the opposite corner, but like two floors down, something like that. He was on another floor on the opposite corner, and I'm running between the rooms. Brock had his whole family there. Kurt just had Karen. He had his daughter there, and I go down. I'm like, "Kurt, everything okay?" Made sure he was going to be tucked in, and he's like, "I'm going to the party." I said, "No, you're not going to the party, dude. Now I'm playing dad. You're not going to the party." "Bruce, I'm fine. I'm going to the party." "No, you're not going. Karen, he can't go to the party. Okay, you guys need to chill. If you're not going to go to the hospital, you're not going to go to the party. Okay, you're grounded. Go to your room." And Kurt's adamant. And then he promises me, he says, "Okay, I won't go." So now I go up and check on Brock. And Brock has his whole family up there, and his mom and dad and his daughter and everything. And I'm like, hey man, how you doing? He says, I'm fine. I said, no, you're not fine. I said, man, we got to get you checked out. With concussions, you're not supposed to sleep. You're not supposed to have anything to eat or drink. You're not supposed to sleep, none of that stuff. And I said, look, I'm next door, man. I'll stay up with you. Probably don't want that, looking at his family and everything, but I'm here. This is how's Kurt? I said, oh man, that son of a bitch wants to go to the party. He's going to the party? Well, I'm going to the party then. I said, no, you're not going to the party, dude. You're going to stay up here. You need to chill. Well, both of these children went to the party. And I'm furious. I'm just like a pissed off parent. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? But if Kurt was going to the party, Brock was going to the party. Brock called Kurt. How you doing, man? You okay? I want to come see you. He's like, well, I'll meet you down at the party. And it's like, well, Kurt's going to the party. And they were like two children and both went to the party and ate and hung out for a while, let everybody know that they were tough and that they were okay.
Obviously they're very competitive because of their background, but they also have, a kindred relationship because of that background. And they're probably both very concerned about hurting the other one. I mean, I can't imagine being Brock that night. You got to feel like at any moment, anything you do to Kurt, you could break his fucking neck for real and hurt him real bad. And you want to try to take care of him. But at the same time, Kurt probably doesn't want you to pussyfoot around. He wants a good match. So you're sort of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Kurt wound up having the surgery on April 11th. So not too terribly long after this, he would only be out for about 3 months and then he would be back. Something that's come out in years since though, Bruce, I've always wanted to ask about is allegedly the WWE doctors knew that Kurt had a tumor and they didn't tell him until after the match. Your response?
What kind of tumor? No, I didn't know that.
Allegedly, Kurt has said that the WWE doctors knew that he had a benign tumor in his neck before WrestleMania, but they didn't tell him about it until after the event.
I don't know. I've never heard that before, and I don't know why they wouldn't tell him.
Let me ask you this. Of course, we're just speculating here, but according to Brock, at a house show in Miami, a couple of weeks prior to this WrestleMania, he was advertised against The Rock in Miami. So it's Rock's quote unquote hometown. And according to Lesnar, about an hour and a half before the match, Rock comes over and says, hey, just want to let you know, Brock, I'm winning clean tonight. And Lesnar allegedly had no problem losing, but he did take offense to knowing that The Rock knew about the finish before he did. He felt like McMahon was screwing with him from afar by keeping him out of the loop. And he had no inclination to play the political game. So he doesn't wind up leaving the company for a whole year, but 2 weeks before being crowned the champion here, he already is starting to wonder, is this really somewhere I want to be? Did you ever have a conversation with Brock about that match in Miami with The Rock?
No, I didn't. And again, I think that you could chalk that up to just immaturity in the business and feeling that and probably having people in his ear stirring things up, because there's nothing unusual about that.
One of the things that I, sort of took away from this documentary, The Mania of WrestleMania, is the conversation with the Undertaker, where they show him talking to the camera and the B-roll footage is him on the motorcycle riding to the ring. And he says, a couple of years ago, I was contemplating retirement, but I still have a passion for this and I enjoy what I do. Where else can you hit somebody in the head and get paid to do it? And he was saying that 2 years prior to this show, and this show's 15 years old. So he was contemplating retirement 17 years ago. And it's pretty timely because we just saw him ride to the ring on WrestleMania 19 on his motorcycle as the American Badass. And if you believe the rumor and innuendo, Bruce, a lot of people are believing that with Kid Rock going to the Hall of Fame, we might see Kid Rock play the Undertaker to the ring one more time on a motorcycle as the American Badass. What would you put the odds at? Obviously we're not on the inside. We're fans watching. What do you think? Undertaker?
I hope not.
You hope not?
Yeah. I don't think that's the Undertaker that people want to see.
Well,
that's just me.
If you want to be the person that people want to see, then you need to go check out our friends over at Just for Men, because their new hair regrowth from Just for Men is an easy to use topical solution that's clinically proven to help regrow hair. Plus, with a unique precision spray applicator, it's hair growth made easy. Simply spray in, sit back, move on. Start winning over thinning. Look for hair regrowth in the shave aisle, or visit our friends Just for Men at jfmgrowhair.com and use promo code regrowth25 to get 25% off your purchase. That's jfmgrowhair.com. And the promo code is regrowth25 for 25% off. Bruce, before we sort of give everybody an insight as to what we're doing next week, let's do some rapid fire Facebook questions. Are you ready?
Fire.
Ryan wants to know, wrestling in baseball stadiums used to be more of a thing. Why do you think WWE hasn't done many of these shows anymore?
I don't know. And personally, I don't think the baseball stadiums are the best venue for wrestling, just because of where you have to place the ring and because of the way they're positioned. I like being on all four sides. That's probably the biggest reason why WWE doesn't do it. It's just, you have a big old empty outfield for the most part, that you got to fill. But I don't know.
Chris Nifong wants to know, how do sponsorships work for pay-per-views? Who decides who will sponsor a show? Did Snickers just put up more money to be the sponsor here?
Well, whoever comes to the money with or whoever comes to the table with money is the one who's going to sponsor the show. You have salesmen that go out and sell sponsorship. So the biggest bidder is going to win. And there's always something that you can sell for a sponsorship. While you may be the title sponsor, there's a lot of different things within the show that they sell. So it's just a matter of who's willing to pay what for, how much for what.
Rob wants to know, what sort of payday is the ref making who works the main event?
It usually depends on the referee and the level of involvement, but they do all right.
Matt wants to know, any truth to the rumor that Bret Hart was contacted to interfere in the Hogan-Vince match?
Bret Hart was talked about, but he was not contacted to my knowledge, but he was talked about.
Lewis wants to know, it's always been my opinion that Scott Steiner muscled up too much in his career, and that he would have been able to have the showdown at WrestleMania 19 that you guys wanted had he not. What say you, Bruce? I guess the opinion or the question from Lewis is, do you think Steiner was too jacked to give you the type of match that you needed?
No, I think that, just Scott with his drop foot and some of his other physical ailments at that time kind of taken their toll.
James asked a great question. He says he went to a Raw in Seattle on August 12th, 2002 at the Key Arena, and Howard Finkel announced to the live crowd that next year WrestleMania was going to be there. And then later he came out and took it back and said it was being considered. Is this the reason why Seattle got WrestleMania?
Yeah, because Howard screwed up and we felt bad. Yeah, that's exactly why.
I was hoping you'd say
God
that.
Damn it, Howard. Now we have to have WrestleMania in Seattle.
Ash wants to know, how good was Victoria in the ring?
She was somebody that grew. She was a lot like Trish Stratus in that she got better as she went on. She trained out in California, went to OVW, and I think as time went on, she got a lot better. I thought she was good in the ring.
Josh wants to know, since the city's bid on WrestleMania, do the boys and girls receive any perks?
Well, they get their hotels and all that stuff paid for. That's part of the package, getting hotel deals and everything else. And for WrestleMania, that's all taken care of for the talent while they're there.
Martin wants to know, who designed the set? It was terrible.
What was wrong with the set? I thought it looked good. It's probably Jason Robinson and the guys in production.
David wants to know, what would have sounded like if Jim Cornette was watching the Shooting Star Press botch?
Why the fuck is that big motherfucker up on the top rope? God damn it. He's going to break his... Oh, shit.
Jacob wants to know, was the Lesnar Angle always scheduled to go on last, or was another match considered for that last spot?
It was always scheduled to go on last.
David says, at the start of the Booker T match, they had a face-off with the referee explaining the rules and asking if there were any questions. It was a cool segment. Why wasn't it done more often?
Cool question. It is done. Here's the problem. Too many guys nowadays, they rush everything.
Right.
And if you just calm down and tell a story and take your time, it usually makes for a better match.
Ross wants to know, was Bruce ever involved in any of the other WrestleMania Fan Fest activities?
As a matter of fact, that was the last one that I appeared as Brother Love at any Fan Fest was in Seattle. But yeah, I was involved in all of them to a point.
Nick wants to know, was Shane going to be involved in the Hogan-Vince feud after Mania?
No, sir.
John wants to know, any specific reason why The Rock wore Austin's vest the majority of the match? Was that his way of paying tribute?
It was just a ha-ha spot.
Corey wants to know, when matches get cut due to time, do the performers still get paid the same?
Yes.
Matt wants to know, did Brock ever want to do the shooting star press again after this, or was he told he couldn't do it?
I would hope he would never want to do it. Let me put it this way. It never came up again.
Paulo wants to know, did it ever feel that Triple H's title reign began to hinder Raw's overall product? I was a fan of Triple H at this time, although I eventually stopped watching Raw and just watched SmackDown because Raw was stale, with Triple H squashing every babyface that came his way.
Okay, what's your question?
Do you think Triple H's title reign hurt the Raw product overall?
Yeah, put it out of business.
James wants to know, why did John Cena not have a match and who could have faced him?
Well, we explained that earlier. As far as Cena, we were going to do the rap battle with an actual rapper. And when it fell through and we kept trying last minute, trying to get people in that spot, and it just never came to be.
Axel wants to know, was Goldberg backstage at WrestleMania 19?
Nope.
Kevin wants to know, what's your favorite Limp Bizkit song?
Rolling, 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 rolling.
Neil says WrestleMania was usually a babyface show. Why didn't that rule apply to Triple H?
I'm sorry. Was he in the last match?
No.
Okay.
Jonathan wants to know, what's a booger red?
That's a good damn question. One day out of the blue, JR came out with old booger red. No one knows where that came from. Undertaker doesn't know where that came from. I would ask JR that one because not sure where old booger red came from.
Michael says, after the success of WrestleMania 19, why hasn't Vince tried hosting a WrestleMania at Yankee Stadium?
Well, I think because he wants to go to the big building and draw more people. But Yankee Stadium would be a cool one.
Last but certainly not least, Travis wants to know, can we hear Johnny Ace sing Crack Addict?
I'm just a crack addict. I have no idea how crack addict goes.
I could tell that was brutal.
Rolling, rolling, rolling. That's what I do on my skateboard. I go rolling, rolling, rolling.
All right, boys and girls, next week we've got a fun episode for you. It's going to be all about the very first draft. So if you'd like to have a question answered about the draft, then shoot on over to our Twitter. It's easy to do. It's at Prichard Show on Twitter. We're going to have a post pinned to the top and you'll be able to ask your questions. The following week, man, we're bringing WrestleMania 4 to you. In the meantime, if you'd like a bonus show, we need to get to 20,000 likes on YouTube before WrestleMania. It's free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and it's youtube.com/something to wrestle. Of course, you can wake up and do your morning deuce with Bruce every single day at facebook.com/something to wrestle. And we're going to have some maybe never before seen pictures pop up every now and again on Instagram. Like, follow, subscribe, all of it's free. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to come see us tomorrow night, St. Patrick's Day at boxofgimmicks.com. It's hockey, it's wrestling, it's unlimited beer. You can't beat it. boxofgimmicks.com, and the promo code is WRESTLE. And Bruce, I guess we should also mention, if you wanted to come see us in New Orleans, you're SOL, man, because Something to Waffle sold out and the live show sold out, but you've got breaking news to share.
I do have breaking news to share because last minute, I will be a part of WrestleCon. I'm going to be appearing from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday, April 6th, from 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon at the Absolute Intense Wrestling booth. They're from Cleveland, Ohio. They're going to be hosting me Friday morning at WrestleCon. So one more chance to come on by and say hello, get an autograph picture, and just say hey.
Well, we're going to say hey next week. He is at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey It's Conrad, and we are out of time. We'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
The